We got a minute left, or we good to go? We're on? Go ahead. 59. Oh, there we go, 9 o'clock. Okay. So we're rolling? Yep, okay. All right, well, let's go ahead and get the engineering committee of August 11th underway. So we'll go ahead and start public comment. Is there any public comment on items that are not on the agenda? And what's is it star 9? Star 9, if you have to raise your hand, it's star 9. Seeing none, we'll go ahead and move on to item 1, which is approval of the minutes from the meeting that we held on July 14th. Is there any comments from the directors with regards to the minutes?
There's not much to comment on.
But, Director Peters needs to unmute herself.
Director Peters, you need to unmute yourself. Oh, gotcha. She's still muted?
Yeah.
Director Peters, you're still muted.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
I thought my speakers I couldn't hear you. I just called and I thought maybe it might be better if I just go through my phone for the audio, and then I can see your video. And that's taking care of it right now.
Okay.
This is my speakers. Can you hear me?
We can hear you a little broken up.
Yeah, so I'm going to switch to my phone. Then that's going to help me do that real quick. I'm sorry. I signed in early and then this happened as soon as it came time for the meeting.
Yeah, we can. We'll go ahead and break for 2 to 3 minutes while we get Director Peters' audio visual taken care of, and then we'll come back with this.
I don't understand why it's not working. I'm on headphones.
Yep, we hear you now.
Is there an echo?
No echo now.
All right. I think we're okay now. Oh my goodness.
All right.
I apologize.
Okay, so let's continue on. Was there any? I don't think Director Wilcox, you had any comments on the minutes. Director Peters, did you have any comments on the minutes?
No, I had no comments on the minutes.
Okay.
My only comment was Charlie.
Yeah. Any comments?
My only comment was there's almost nothing to comment on.
Is there anybody in the public that wants to comment on the minutes? Star 9, right? Yes. Seeing none, so we'll go ahead and close item 1 and move on to item 2, which is the engineering budget. This is the preliminary 2021 budget. And I think the best way to do this is what I will do is I'll kind of look at the staff report, the overall numbers at the end, and then I'll just go through item by item, line by line, and we can talk about them. If that works for the directors, that's how we'll go ahead and proceed. So on the back of the staff report, second page, you'll see the budgetary impacts, and what we have is salaries and benefits, temporary labor, non-operating costs, and capital projects. And it's got the 2020 number as well as the 2021 proposed numbers. And overall, what you can see is there was a little over 1.6% increase in the salaries. There was a negative 8.6% decrease in the benefits, and we'll talk a little bit about that when we get into the line items. We'll get a little more information. Temporary labor is 100% because we're not proposing to have
The increase in salary line was in part due by the moving of one position in
Correct.
engineering.
Correct.
So it's not truly an increase in salary. You're decreasing one place, increasing another with a net zero.
Correct.
Okay.
FTE line.
FTEs are the
Correct.
same. You're just basically moving FTE from administration to engineering.
Yeah. And then the non-labor operating costs, we've reduced those, we're proposing to reduce those by almost 62% for 2021, as well as the capital projects, the 52,915, we're proposing to reduce by just over 50%, 1.5%. So overall, the engineering department budget for 2021 is proposed to be reduced by 42.5%. And so with that, what I'll do is go through the line items. We can talk a little more about those as we go through them. So now we're looking at the attachment, which is the actual line-by-line item for the budget. The first group really is with regards to salary and benefits, and what you'll see is that there was this overall increase, what is that, roughly $35,000. So what happens is we did bring Shannon, the business services technician, over into engineering because the majority of her function actually involves the engineering department, and so it's the better fit for that position to be in our department. But what you'll see is that the number increase isn't 100% of her salary increase, and the reason that is because we had a senior right-of-way or right-of-way agent 2 at a top level have retired. We brought a new engineering right-of-way technician into one bottom level. So there was a big discrepancy in what those salaries are. So that was a reduction partly in our salary from last year, as well as some changes in terms of our step increases and those types of things. So those are all factored into that number. So yes, it went up by roughly the 1.6%, but that includes the Shannon's, which is an FTE. Thank you. Man, I just drew blank. FTE position. Overall, not an increase. We just, like you said, Director Wilcox, we just brought it over from the operations side into engineering. Is there any, and then sticking with the benefits part, the big decline that you see in the benefit, even though we increased an individual onto our side, is the fact that in the health insurance for the 2020 budget, we had quite a large number in there for the 2020 budget, and you can see that is item 51312, health insurance. And you can see it has been sitting at 19 at about 342. In 2020, we had budgeted 472, but we actually are only forecasting again about 350, and this coming year, we see it at roughly 353, 354. So that's why there was a big decrease in the benefits component of it, even though we added an FTE to the department.
Why was it so high last year?
With that,
This is Marvin. It was high last year. It was just overestimated. This year, we are looking at the payouts. Like, not everyone takes the medical premium. And so last year, we just had it loaded in as everyone would take the full medical premium. But this year, we're kind of looking at it in terms of who's actually getting the medical premium or who's getting the payouts. If you get the payout, the district pays about $900 a month. If the district pays for your medical, the district pays about $1,900 a month. So we're dialing into that a little closer.
Oh, okay. Okay. And then I had one more question about the salary. So your senior right-of-way someone retired, a higher position, and so the replacement was at step 1 again. And so the difference between the step 1 position and Shannon's salary, that's why it was just a little bit of an increase in the salary. Is that what you said?
yeah, correct. Right, that there's a there's a big difference in the
Okay.
in the senior that retired. Yeah.
Terrific. All right. Thank you.
If no other questions on the salaries and benefits, then I'll move on to the next line item. Is that okay? So the next one we'll start here is at 52501, which is chemicals. It's towards the bottom of the first page. This is basically our fuel for our fleet vehicles. you can see that for 2020, we had 15,000. 2019, we spent about 8,200. We're forecasting to spend about 7,000 this year. We reduced partly because of COVID. There's just a little less things going on overall in terms of our usage. And so for next year, I've reduced it from the 15 down to 10,000. I think that's a number that we can live with for next year in terms of projects, et cetera, and moving around. Any comments on that? Okay. The next one is equipment maintenance. That's 52,503. That's actually at the bottom of the first page and a little more of the details on the top of the second page. A lot of this is survey software licenses, upgrade support. That has to do with our GIS, our ARC, AutoCAD, et cetera, copier maintenance. Those are all things that we have to deal with on an annual basis. So that's the 30,000. That was 2020 was 30,000, and I'm keeping it at that. As you can see that we're basically going to be spending that amount of money. So I don't see any real reduction to be able to make in that. But in the equipment rentals and leases, we had 10,000 in last year's in the 2020 budget, proposing that we don't have any in this year's budget. I don't see any equipment rentals or leases that we're going to need to deal with for this upcoming year. So I have that at zero for the 2021 budget. And so overall, we reduced this item from 40,000 from last year to 30,000. Any questions on that item? Okay, next one's 52,504, materials. This is basically culverts and miscellaneous materials, which could be if we're doing some potholing and we have to go back and do a little pavement restoration work or patching or gravel, et cetera. We had 100,000 in the 2020 budget. You can see that in 2019 we only spent about 15,000, and in 2020 we forecasted that we're going to be spending about 25,000 this upcoming year. So in the culvert section, I've reduced that from 90,000, which is the 2020 budget, down to 30,000 for 2021. It just means that if we get a bunch of culverts that we have to deal with and replace, we'll be limited, right? We'll have to be more selective in what we do. And then the miscellaneous materials as well. I kept that the same because that's just items that we typically deal with when we're doing our survey work, et cetera. Any questions on that one?
Doug, do you know how many culverts we manage that are ours, essentially, that would fall under this line item that are out there?
I don't know how many.
2,000 plus. Yeah.
Yeah, but they're not all district. So some of them are under encroachment permits, right, where the responsibility of the property owners is to maintain those, and they have to pay for those, or we replace them and they pay for it.
Big number, though.
But it is a large
It's a very big number, and a typical culvert replacement runs anywhere between $10,000 to $18,000.
That's correct, depending on what we do and who's doing the work, right? If we need to get a contractor out there to do that work versus, correct,
Yeah.
versus our crews going out there and doing some of that.
I would just make one comment here. Some of these adjustments are not true savings, because if we aren't spending the money, reducing the budget isn't saving money if we wouldn't be spending it otherwise. And so all this exercise is a ground truthing of the budget to make it more in line with what we actually spend. And if you have a budget of $40,000 and you spend $20,000, it's not as if you're really saving money. That money just goes into reserves or into some other project.
Yep.
So I don't consider these true savings.
Okay. Director Peters, any comments on that?
Yes, I have a question. I have two. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Not really.
Okay. So my first question is, you said the 2020 budget, and how come there's no 2019 or 2020 budget numbers shown on the sheet? That's my first question. And my second question is, why would engineering be buying the culverts? Doesn't maintenance, the engineers aren't going to go out and dig up the culverts and install the culverts. And it isn't.
So you were breaking up, but I think I got the gist of the two questions. So the first one is with related to the culverts. So the encroachment unit sits under the engineering department, and the encroachment unit's responsibility is to deal with all of these culverts. And so we go out there, we make sure that they're, if they need to be replaced, that we work with the property owners. If they're culverts that are ours, they do the investigation work to determine that there are culverts, and then we replace those. So that's why culverts sit within the engineering department versus the maintenance department, which I'm assuming was the question. The second part was, let me remember, what was the, do you remember the first?
Why do engineers have to be designing these?
Oh, so again, in terms of the engineering department designing, the culverts are pretty straightforward. We've got our standard details for the most part. We size it based on master plans. Again, it's the encroachment department that handles those. We lost her completely. Okay. Director Peters, I don't know if you can hear us or not, but apparently we've lost the connection with you. So, how do you want to keep going? You want to take another break? What do you?
Let's give her 2 minutes.
Okay.
I'd say take another break.
Okay. Let's, we'll go ahead and take another 5-minute break, see if we can get Director Peters back online.
Okay, online, those of you there.
So maybe I'm muted now.
Last week, our son
Can we hear you? Can you say something, Director Peters?
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes. Okay. We're all good now?
I think so, but I'm thinking I'm both on the, now I have to hang up my phone.
No, you sound fine here. We can hear you and see you here.
Okay, how's that? Is that better? You still hear me?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay, we're in business
Okay.
now. Okay,
All right.
okay.
So what was the, I tried to respond to your questions. Did you hear those?
No, I didn't.
Okay.
But did you hear my questions?
So we got one of them. The other one was not quite sure. So if you want to repeat your questions, then we'd be happy to answer them.
Okay, all right. So my first question, and you heard my first question, is why don't we show the actual and forecast on all the items? That was my general overall question. And the second question was, why would engineering be buying the culverts? Wouldn't maintenance, usually maintenance or operations or something, I mean, engineers aren't going to go out and install culverts, are they? So why are the materials purchased by engineering instead of in the O&M budget?
Yeah, so for the forecasting one, I may hand that off to Marvin, but for the second question, because the encroachment unit is within the engineering department, that is their charge and responsibility is to deal with these culverts. When we get a failing culvert that comes in from operations or maintenance, and then they do the investigation to see who's responsible for it, whether that's a district culvert versus a private culvert, and then go forward with, if it's a private culvert, making sure that they respond and reach out to the individuals to have them repair those or replace it in a timely fashion, or that we would do that and then charge them for the work. If they're a district-owned facility, then they determine that's a district-owned facility, then that's when we would get that taken care of. That's why that sits in this budget here. And whether that's a contractor that does the work or whether we have our maintenance department do the work, it just depends on the timing.
Okay, if the contractor does the work, we buy the materials.
Yeah, so we typically would buy the materials anyway, if it's depending on the culvert type. So if it is a district-owned culvert that the encroachment unit has determined needs to be replaced, then it would come out of our budget.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you.
All right. Do you want to respond
Marvin,
to
do you want to answer the second?
about the forecast question?
Yeah, Director Peters, the actual expenditures are associated with descriptions when we expend them. So we buy nuts and bolts and pipes. It wouldn't be represented in terms of it's only represented in terms of the account we're charging as opposed to the items. When we budget, we're budgeting in terms of a particular process or unit we're going to spend against that account. When we actually exhaust it, there's a lot of detail associated with it, the description of it, the vendor, all of this stuff, and it's not practical to put it in this type of format.
So if we bought culverts last year or in 2019, it wouldn't, even though we're budgeting it out of this item, it wouldn't be charged against this item.
No, it would be, but when we actually buy it and expense it, you would have a description of bolts, nuts, screws, and pipe fittings, not culverts. In other words, when you budget it, you're not gonna budget that detail to it. You're gonna budget in terms of the overall cost that you're gonna spend on those culverts.
Okay, that's fine.
It's kind of think about it in terms of a capital project or any other type of process that we use, like we buy paper supplies. We're not going to budget any other detailed description associated with that, other than us thinking about it in terms of how much am I going to spend on supplies. Some items lend themselves to more of a detail, like if we're going to contract for a raw water master plan, then you could use it as a line item. You wouldn't put the 10 processes of the raw water master plan you're going to do in the budget. You would
Wouldn't
just say
call
how
it
much money.
office supplies or anything bought against this engineering materials, wouldn't it fall on this engineering 52504? And wouldn't it show cost?
Yes, I mean, the miscellaneous materials, these are things I think that will give you a little bit more flexibility in your budget. Those miscellaneous materials are still going to be associated with culverts. It's just that he's thinking in terms of, we may have other stuff that wouldn't fall right within the culverts, but it's still considered part of materials, account 52504.
I'll get with you on this offline, Marvin. That's fine. Okay, I'm good.
Okay, then we'll move on to the next one, which is 52505, which is safety and supplies. We had a budget of $5,000 last year. We're gonna spend about $1,000 this year, $1,500. Most of this is gonna be for vests, eyewear equipment, your typical safety stuff. The big item that they had last year was the safety gear for hydroelectric, which requires the clothing that allows you to go in for, into the powerhouses, and we chose not to do that. We've got temporary jumpers that we can use, we can put on if we have to go out there, so we chose not to spend that money on that, and we would not do that this year. Any questions on that item? Okay.
No.
Next one, small tools. Again, that's cameras, that's lathes, that's little things and survey, different things. You can see we spent about $1,500 is what we're forecasting this year, so went from $2,000 down to $1,000 for the next year's budget. Again, this is a pretty small item, so any questions on that one? Okay. So the next one is 52603. This is consulting and contractor fees. You can see here in 2019 we spent almost $490,000. We're forecasted to spend about $563,000 in this year's budget. The budget for this year was $440,000, and there was an amendment that was done for another $145,000. That was a mid-budget or mid-year amendment. That also includes encumbrances. So the 2020 forecast also includes encumbrances that we may have had in 2019 that we just haven't finished up. This is for quite a few different things. Part of this is outside services, miscellaneous engineering. We may need to hire a consulting firm to help us out with the structural detail that we may not have the expertise in-house to do. Those types of things where there's some expertise where we would want to have somebody else take care of that. Then once we hire on and work with them on that, then depending on what project it is, that number ultimately gets charged to the FTAR and to the project. But it sits in this one as just the flexibility to be able to get some of that information in there, and then it gets charged ultimately to the project. The raw water master plan, he actually had the raw water master plan as part of the phase 2 work, which is the section 8, which is what he had $200,000 there for. So we reduced that to $50,000, and that's basically to help us get forward as we move forward with the H&H and the technical memorandum.
That reflects the fact that we're slowing down.
Correct. Yep. Hydraulic modeling, we use Setaroo quite a bit for some of that. And so a lot of that's just encumbered monies. So we don't anticipate having to use them a lot, this coming year. Tanya can take care of some of those things. It'll just impact her time a little bit on other projects, but we can utilize her, to do quite a few of those items. Stormwater remediation, that was one where we have areas, where we have a drainage and it's overtopping our canals, blowing out our canals. So engineering goes in and designs an overshoot or a crossing that allows that stormwater to continue on past. That's what we've done in the past. We had 80,000 in there, this year, proposing to do less. That just means that when one of these items come up, and what happens a lot of times is some of these we know quite a bit in advance that they're a problem, and others we get a big event, which daylights the problem, and then it's something that we need to take care of, exactly, relatively quickly. So we do want to keep some money in there in case we run into that in this coming year. And then the right-of-way issues, that has to do with title services, appraisals, those types of things. That 10,000, we would keep it at 10,000 because that's about what we're spending in that item on a yearly basis. So, any questions on this item? Yeah, Dr. Peters.
Yeah, how much did the sediment study cost last year?
Did you say the sediment study?
Uh-huh.
Sediment study for?
The reservoirs?
We didn't do one.
We approved it for this coming.
Yeah, so
It's still in the future.
is that the one that we've been talking about in engineering committee?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so that study is actually being done in-house by our engineers here. We will hire a consultant to do the bathymetry work, and we're working on that right now, to get costs associated with that, but that would come out of this year's budget. And that would be under the sediment removal program. We talked about that at the engineering committee, that in lieu of doing some of that sediment removal, that we would spend some of that money to get the bathymetry part done. We would develop the study and then come back and discuss that with the board.
Oh, I see. So that wouldn't be paid out of consulting. The bathymetry work wouldn't be paid out of the consulting budget?
Right, because we've got money sitting in the sediment program. And so the recommendation would be just to take some of that money that we have itemized for specific projects and use it to develop the bathymetry part of that study.
We got money in this year's
Yes,
sediment
correct.
program. There's no money in next year's sediment
Yeah,
program.
that's coming up, right?
Correct.
But yeah,
We're reducing that line item to zero.
We'll encumber it this year.
Yeah, exactly. And so, okay, so not all consulting comes out of consulting budget. It comes out of program budget sometimes.
correct.
Okay, that seems odd to me, but okay. Okay, thanks. I have a suggestion.
Sure.
Maybe we could go by page. I don't know if you, and Nick, I defer to you, but we could go by page and say, does Nick or I have a question on each? Because some of these, there's no discussion whatsoever.
I don't, you have a question on every line item, or I don't see any purpose in that. We might as well go line by line.
All right, that's fine.
I got all day.
Good, me too, except for later this afternoon.
Okay, so we'll continue, we're on to 52604, legal fees. We don't anticipate any specific legal fees that we're gonna need with regards to, these are kind of a non-specific project type of attorney items, and I just don't see any need at this point that we would have to have it in this year's budget. So it wasn't budgeted in last year's budget either, so it's keeping it the same. So the next one's 52609, that's the temporary labor. We had 100,000 in this last year's budget. And actually, so this 52609 is temporary labor that we do with a third-party group, which is going through a firm to hire. And if you look back on the first page under 51201, which is temporary salary, you see that we've spent roughly 45,000 in this year's budget. I'm not showing any for next year's budget. The right-of-way temp and the construction temp that we hired to do some of the work, we're just not going to be hiring them next year. But what they were hired directly by the district. So that's why they did not show up under this 52,609, they showed up under the 51,201. So we did hire some temporary folks, this year, finished up. One was, helping out with the ditch tender's house, and then we had one in the right-of-way and the drafting department that was helping out with GIS as well as, some right-of-way work. So we're proposing to not hire any temporary labor, in this coming year.
So for the combi phase one, encasement, we're using district inspectors?
Correct. That's correct. And if that particular one, would probably come out of the specific project budget.
Sure.
For inspection like that, whereas these are more, helping out internally in the office, and or the construction, individual to help with some of the work out at the ditch tender's house. So we're proposing not to hire any temporary labor, both either through a third party or directly, with us for this coming year. Any questions on that? Okay. Next one's 52,607, which is dues and publications. You can see we spent almost 11,000 in 2019. We forecasted about 8,500 this year. I'm recommending 7,750 for this coming year. We had originally budgeted 15,000 in 2020. There's a few of them: AWWA, ENR, which is Engineering News and Review. The AP, which is Association of Environmental Professionals, that's the sequel books. We get updates on those books on a yearly basis. PMI, and then MetroList, Data Tree, those are items that right-of-way folks use on a regular basis to get documents, et cetera. So, any questions on the dues and publications? Yeah, Director Peters.
Do we have PMI certified people in the engineering department?
We do not at the moment.
And so
Gary was the one that was, but we do get their publications and information. So that just gets passed around, and we do utilize that in terms of being able to review their publications. But there is not a certified PMI here at the district at this point.
Okay. And the MetroList and Data Tree, so that's just for routine easements and that kind of thing?
Yeah, the right-of-way folks use that when they pull documents on the Data Tree for properties, et cetera, and then the MetroList, right, to help develop costs, et cetera.
Okay. On the 2020, we did a mid-year adjustment and went from 8,500 to 15,000. What did we cost that much more this year?
I do not know where the 15,000 originated from. You can see that we're going to be spending about 8,500 is what we're forecasting for the year. Where the 15,000 came from, Gary had that in there. I do not know what that number.
So we haven't encumbered it, we haven't spent it or anything so far. That's money that's
Correct.
just excess.
Yeah, the forecast that you see for the 2020 forecast, we're showing that we're spending about $8,500 by the end of the year.
But didn't just in June we decided, you trued up the budget some and you added money to it for some reason? It was after Gary was gone and mid-year 2020 adjustment.
That 15,000 wasn't adjusted.
I think that could have been the original budget. Because not every line item was adjusted.
Correct.
So it may have been in the original budget.
The original budget was 8,500.
No, the forecast is 8,500.
No, that's the forecast. That's not the original budget. So that line item you see there, right, where on the second one, the second number from the left, that's forecast. That's what we anticipate we'll spend through the end of the year. So the 8,500 is what we expect to spend through the end of the year. The budget, and I just looked on here, was originally $15,000. So we didn't change it in mid-year. It's just we're not going to spend that much this year.
Okay.
So put it another way, the true savings, the difference between 7,750 and 8,500.
That's right. Correct.
Right. Okay.
So all those other numbers are just theoretical.
Budget item.
And we're not exactly sure how that came to 15,000 over, only that 2019's actual was nearly 11,000.
Okay.
So it's down from 2019 anyway.
Right. And some of those dues are like are 3 years. they're due every 3 years or 2 years, right? So some of them you have a bigger payment in a given year, and then it goes down the following year just because it's a 2 or 3 year subscription or renewal type of thing.
So the true savings here is about $750.
From what we anticipate spending this year, correct?
Okay.
Okay, next one, 52,710, which is office supplies. The majority of this cost you'll see is paper. We're forecasting to spend about $13,000 this year of the $15,000. I'm reducing it to $9,000. The biggest paper expense that we have is and I can't think of the name of it, but it's the paper we use to develop our operations maps that we give to our field staff because they have to be waterproof, otherwise they get destroyed. So that cost is typically anywhere to $6,000 to $7,000 a year, depending on how many pages and how many books we have to develop. And that comes out of the GIS drafting department that puts those maps together. So that's why that number is pretty substantial because we have to. The paper is not cheap. Any questions on that?
We cut the trees down, it's got flat to make the paper, right?
Yeah, then you got to put them in some stuff.
Yeah, but then we have to build the chemical plant.
Exactly.
And the tree.
Details.
So no questions, I'll move on to 52,711, which is training. And again, we're, especially with the COVID that's coming up, off-site training is kind of the thing of the past, at least for the interim. So any training or seminars, are all webinars that we'd be doing with at this point, which the fees are typically considerably less, and then you're not paying for travel, et cetera. So I've reduced that amount. You see that we've only spent about $3,500, or what we're proposing to spend this year, and so I've got $3,000 for next year. No questions on that?
Well, seeing this, the true savings are actually fairly small. So what it's telling us is that you have already, in practice, made a lot of these cuts.
Correct.
And so saying that we're saving the difference between, $15,000 and $3,000, it's not that at all.
Yeah, and in another way, you can look at it from 2019's actual down to what we forecast for 2020 to what we anticipate for 2021. It is a minor, de minimis saving, but
They add up.
squeezing it,
You're squeezing the stone.
squeezing it pretty tight. Yeah. Not much left.
So the next one, 52,713, which is utilities, that's basically our cell phones, and you see that that's gone up substantially. The reason is as we have quite a few more phones now that we've given our field staff. Part of that has been because there were some upgrades that were needed, and part of that was because of COVID. To be able to operate remotely, they can use the phones to check emails, to be able to respond back and forth to us without having to come into the office. So we've increased the number of cell phones, smartphones, for lack of a better term, which just cost us more money. So the budget we had for last year was $700. We're having $3,500 in for this year.
And so this is an anticipated ongoing increased cost because
Right.
like we keep it. Okay.
Yeah, correct. Absolutely. So the next one's 52,911. That's actual easement purchases. Here you can see that in 2019 we spent a little over $32,000. We're forecasting about $27,000 being spent this year. So I've got it basically the same as the 2020 budget, which is $30,000. And these are purchases of easements. They're cleanups where we come in and we're doing work on a project and we've got an access, or we don't have a lack of an access easement. So that's the opportunity to work with the property owner to develop some of these easements. Some of these are prescriptive, et cetera. Those allow us to go in there and get these cleaned up, or maintenance is doing a project and they have some limitations in terms of the easements that are actually out there, and so this gives us an opportunity to clean them up. So that's what this money is. Any questions or comments on that one? Okay. Vehicle replacements. We've got the 27 survey vehicle, I think it's a Chevy pickup. So we're proposing not to purchase one for next year. And we'll just keep limping along with that vehicle. It seems to be operating okay at the moment. It's old, it's got some miles on it, but it's still functioning, so we can utilize it next year. But ultimately, that will need to be replaced. It's, 13-plus years old now. The surveyors are a little rough on their trucks sometimes. Yeah, question?
Did you buy one in 2020? It says it was, 2020 was 30,000. Did you buy one in 2020? Did you buy a different vehicle with the 30?
No, we did not buy a vehicle this year. It was in the budget for 30,000. We did not purchase it. That was for the survey equipment, survey rig. We did not purchase a new pickup for them, and we don't plan on doing that next year either. We're postponing that purchase.
But it's a safe vehicle. They're going to be, it's not jeopardizing safety or anything.
No, it's still functioning.
But another way of looking at that is every year the vehicle gets 1 year older, so sooner or later it's going to have to be replaced.
Yeah.
So this is not a long-term saving.
No, I mean, ultimately we need to replace it now, but it's still working, and so we can utilize it for another year.
So is my '89 pickup truck.
Yeah.
So I'm not about to replace it.
But when it becomes a safety issue and.
Yeah, then absolutely.
It's getting there, very close.
But my point is that this is just another case of kicking the can down the road, except the can in this case is a vehicle, which is a type of a can. And those are not true savings over the long haul. I think as a board, we need to look at the big picture. We're nitpicking nuts and bolts on maintenance items here. This is not going to help us in the long run. We're going to have to spend this money at some point.
Right. I concur. And that was my question. It was in the
Which
budget.
means
Why didn't we
funds
just?
for that have to be raised somehow.
Mhm. And my point was in the budget this year, why didn't we just go ahead and get it if it was needed? Or was it not needed yet? I don't know.
Because we're trying to save money this year as well.
Absolutely.
It's still functioning. It is not a safety issue. We felt it prudent not to spend money on a new vehicle, even though it is in the budget for this year.
So that helps our overall financial picture. It means that we're spending less than the budgeted amount, and that money then rolls over into funding reserves,
Correct.
which are dangerously low.
Correct.
Okay, next item.
Next item is equipment purchases. Really, this is just copiers, printers, plotters, drone. We've got a couple of drones that we utilize for survey as well as construction inspection. I don't propose that we purchase any new equipment in the coming year. The copiers should be fine. They're relatively new. The drone equipment, et cetera, plotters, those are all things that we can live without in terms of using what we have. So I don't anticipate having to spend money on that specifically, which is why there's no money in the 2021 budget for equipment.
Toys are all still good.
Yes. Printer obviously is a big one if it goes out, but we have maintenance agreements with them, et cetera, so we should be fine. Okay. No other questions, and we'll go on to the project budgets, the programmatic budgets, I should say. And the next item in the committee meeting is the actual CIP. And so we'll talk more in specifics in terms of projects within each of these line items. So the thought is these numbers that I'm showing in 2021 are reflected in the CIP that we'll be talking about in terms of individual projects for the next item. So if it's okay with the board members, I'll just go through these as the higher level number that we can talk about like on this worksheet, and then we'll get into the details of specific projects if you have those questions on the next item. Is that acceptable to
Absolutely.
the board members?
Jump to CIP would be fine with me.
Yeah, okay. Think you okay with that?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. Okay, so 52907, which is the pipeline replacement program, you can see that it went from, we have 1,500 in this year's budget. I put that up to a little over $2 million, $2,050,000 for projects. my thought process is a little bit different than the previous engineering managers in terms of just having a specific amount of money in these programs and then trying to make projects fit within them. I'm more project specific, so for this particular line item, it went up by almost $500,000, but there's specific projects that are high priorities that need to get done, which is what's reflected in the number. Same with the next.
Those projects are all in the,
CIP.
CIP, and they're on this list?
Some of them are, not all of them, because some of the projects we'll be working on next year, so they're not showing up in the project status yet.
Right.
Yep. Same with the pressure reducing program. I've got, it was budgeted at 160. I'm proposing that we have 480 in that budget. There's actually 3 projects that we can be doing this next year. And so that's why that number went up. The raw water repairs, that number dropped a little bit. It was 1.8 million is what we had for 2020, and I'm reducing that again based on the projects that I think we can accomplish next year, and keeping within the overall concept and understanding from the rates committee and the board in general of reducing the capital program for this year by roughly $7.5 million, which is what these numbers are reflecting, and you'll see that in the CIP. Backbone extension program, that is one that we show as no, oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, Director Peter.
Yeah, and so it looks like it's always the raw water program that gets cut more. Is it because, why is that? It seems like the raw water program, there's dramatic work that needs to be happening. Is it because you don't contract out raw water work, or why do we always cut the raw water and increase the treated water?
Well, we don't always increase the treated water. In this particular year, we're putting more money into
water.
Yeah, in the treated water program, we're putting more money into this year's budget. It just has to do with the projects, and it's choosing how many projects we can do in a particular year. Treated water and raw water with a reduced budget, I can only do so many projects within the number that I'm given. And in this particular layout, I've got some of the priorities higher in the treated water pipeline than the raw water facility.
Well, the treated water system has a greater depth of reserves to draw upon as well. I mean, capacity fees go into a fund which is really only available for expanding and improving the treated water system. There is no such program for the raw water system. So the treated water system has much more capability of doing this sort of thing.
Right, although this budget does not have capacity fees being utilized for this 2021 budget.
That's fine, but they're still going to sit there
yeah, correct.
As a reserve.
Correct.
And they're available for the future.
And some of the raw water facilities don't necessarily fall under raw water repairs program, right? They're also in the non-programmatic section, which we'll talk about when we get to the CIP, but there's other items. The non-programmatic is both treated and raw water, so.
Okay. We'll talk about it in the CIP.
Okay. So for backbone, we do not have any money for next year's. We are still working, and we'll talk about in project status. We are still working on putting together a package and getting it out to bid to start work on sections within the existing system. That'll still get done this year. That'll be funded under this year's budget. We'll have that out by the end of the year, obviously. The work will most likely be done next year, but the money will be encumbered under the 2020 budget. So for 2021, we will not have any money to encumber funds, so we would have to wait until 2022 to be able to start that project back up. The next one is the 52912, which is Community Investment Program. Again, that's another item that we're proposing to not have any funding in this year. Next year. And into next year, I'm sorry. There is funding in this year. We're finishing up Table Meadow 2. That's getting finalized here in the next few weeks. And then there's not enough money for this year's budget to be able to develop the next project that's on the list. And then without the 2021 money, there won't be enough money to develop the project in 2021 either. So it'll be depending on how much is put into the program in 2022 budget, whether we could develop the next program, the next project on the list.
This is a very sad day.
Extended CEQA, we have 30,000 in there. My line item is showing 0. I thought there was a number in there before. Anyway, basically the extended CEQA that we need to do is specific to the Banner Cascade Pipeline project. We've got, the next year to do to get it ready to do the
Final canopy.
the canopy study, and then there's one more after that. I think we've got 2 years left on that to do. So that's what that 30,000 is for that extended CEQA. I think previously we had some extended CEQA for the Maven Phase 2 and 3. I don't know specifically why it was in the budgeted items before, but there is no extended CEQA required for Phase 2 and 3. That work's been completed and done. The construction's finished. So I'm not sure why that number was in there.
I have a question.
Before. Yeah.
And so the Banner Cascade was 30,000 and the Maven was 170,000? That's really,
Yeah,
that's
I
a
can't
big,
tell you where that 170,000 came from. That was put in by my predecessor, nor one of those projects require any additional extended CEQA monitoring or requirements. There is no additional work that needs to be done to those projects. They've been constructed, they are completed,
170,000?
and we're done.
What happened to the 170,000 then? Got moved into another project?
Probably got amended, yeah. It probably got moved, because if it's showing 0 there now, it was part of the amendment, the major amendment.
We utilized it for
We
another.
moved it somewhere.
If it doesn't get spent, it gets reallocated to a different project, or ultimately it would go into the reserves if we don't spend it. But there's no reason why we need to do anything for those 2 projects.
Okay.
The next one is the sediment removal program. Again, you see that we had 1.2 in this year's budget. We're going to have none in next year's budget, and part of that is that discussion that we've had at the engineering committee about doing our reservoir surveys and our study to determine the value and what projects we really need to be focusing on in terms of the sediment removal versus maybe focusing our attention more on preventing further sediment impacts to some of our facilities, and whether some of these smaller operating reservoirs are even needed anymore in terms of operations of the system, and maybe it makes more sense to remove them or abandon them. So that's what that study is going to be doing. So we're going to be developing that and bringing it into the engineering committee and ultimately to the board next year. And so I would recommend that we don't put any money in the budget for sediment removal next year until we get through with that study and have a discussion. Then we can decide as we move forward how we're going to handle that and start to put that back into the 2021 or 2022 budget. Yes, sir.
I would just make a philosophical point here. I can understand reducing it in one year, but over the long term, this is not prudent management. We have a sediment problem. We're going to have to deal with it. This is not a long-term saving. This is going to have to go back in the future, and then future budgets are going to have to be bigger, and they're going to have to be funded somehow. This is again an example of just kicking the can down the road. This does not help the district in the long run.
Director Peters?
I completely concur with Nick. It seems like we know some of our small reservoirs. For example, I saw the Valley View Reservoir for the first time, and the operator was going, this is unsustainable. I've been asking for years and years and years to get this sediment removed. And it's done with our own, we don't contract that work out, do we? It's done with our own labor. Is that correct? Is that correct?
No, so, well, I guess it depends. Most of the work like the Loma Rica and Newtown that we've done in recent years, was all contract work. Some of the smaller reservoirs, maintenance may go in and do some cleaning, but not typically done very often, which is partly why these reservoirs are filling in, right? Our maintenance of these facilities has been not proactive, more reactive, and so most of this work that we've been doing is all contract work.
But the point I'm making, and I'll just say once more, and that is that many of these cuts are really counterproductive, and you know it's really kind of like cutting off your head because you have a headache.
Once we find out where all the money's going, we'll be able to readjust.
Yeah, but we have to have enough money so that we can fund these things in the future.
Right.
That won't be my problem, thank goodness.
So the last one is the non-programmatic. That one can vary quite a bit depending on the projects. As you can see in the 2020 forecast, we've got $20 million being spent, right? Because we have encumbrances related to Combi Phase 1, that's a multi-year project. We also have Alta Sierra Tank, some of those things. So there's typically some bigger projects that sit in the non-programmatic section. Example, the raw water, right? Combi Phase 1 is a raw water facility. So we've just spent $20 million on the pipeline plus another $7 on the siphon. So in the last 5 years, we're going to be spending roughly $27 million in a raw water facility, which is the Combi Phase 1 and the Bear River Canal. But then it also includes bigger projects like Alta Sierra Reservoir replacement with the tanks. So it fluctuates quite a bit. As we'll talk about in the CIP, what I anticipate projects that we can do are going to total about $2.2 million in this coming year. So again, overall, the impacts, and I think the big one to talk about, right, is the capital projects. The fact that I've got about just over $6 million in capital projects slated for 2021, that is specifically reflecting the request to reduce $7.5 million from the capital program for this 2021 budget. And so by doing that, we can have this $6 million, and that has roughly, I think it's 7.9 or something million that will not be utilized from the property taxes for the 2021 capital program.
Okay, I need to comment on that. So reducing capital program $6 million, I understand that. That capital program, Marvin, is funded exclusively from property tax?
And I mean, debt proceeds as well.
Largely from property tax. So by reducing the capital program $6 million, what you're doing in effect is shoveling $6 million of property tax into supporting below cost of service water.
That is correct. The property taxes will be used to service some of the debt.
But basically, from a high level, this is a transfer of property tax into supporting below cost of service water, correct?
That's correct.
The cost of our water does include the service of debt.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. You know, I think we're skating on thin ice here. I think we're getting closer and closer to a point where a big lawsuit comes down. Because I believe that supporting below cost of service water from property tax is arguably illegal, and it's immoral. If it's not illegal, it should be, and it is immoral.
And who said we were going to do that, Nick?
That's what this budget does.
No, it's not. I disagree completely.
Yeah, it is.
We're building reserves and assessing our situation so we can figure out where all the money is and where it all went.
Fine. And you can look at it however you want.
There's no problem having reserves. It's not a bad idea to have a little few pennies in the bank.
I would agree.
Is there any other comments with regards to the proposed 21 engineering budget at this point?
No.
Do you have any?
No, I think under the circumstances, we have no choice but to do this. You know, it's painful. I think it is not wise management. All you're doing is kicking the can down the road, and there's going to be hell to pay in the future.
So as we move capital projects to taxes to help offset debt, pay for debt, was one of the requests that the rates committee had suggested to the board, that we look into ways to help pay for some of the debt through capital projects. And this budget produces that. Is it sustainable in the long run?
No.
No. Completely agree.
It gets us through the next year.
Yes.
Mostly, but it is an unwise, in the long scheme of things, this cannot be maintained.
I think most of us would agree. Correct.
I agree.
Okay.
Step down off my soapbox.
Any public comment on the item before us here, which is the proposed 21 engineering budget? Star 9, if anybody wants to raise their hand. Seeing none, we'll go ahead and, before I close item 2, so now this document will be put in with the overall budget that will then come back to APC, is that correct?
Correct.
In September?
That is correct.
Okay.
Do we need to make a recommendation to
Yeah, that was gonna
on to
be-
APC?
That was gonna be my question.
We did not do that with the APC during the other budgets.
This is purely informational.
It's purely informational. And then the APC makes the full recommendation to the board, to the budget. So this is an informational item that will eventually be to the APC. If there were any changes and adjustments to it, staff would go back, make those changes and adjustments.
Okay, it's informational. It moves on to APC. Just know that it's moving on to APC over my objections. I don't think this budget is sustainable. I think it's wrong.
Okay.
Budgets are moral documents, basically. This is not right.
Okay.
Okay, well, then go ahead and we'll close item, I'm sorry. No, we're good. We'll go ahead and close item number 2. Does anybody need to take a break, or are we good to keep doing that a lot today?
Got our information.
Is everybody okay to continue on? Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
All right, we'll go ahead and move on to item number 3, which is the 5-year CIP, which is capital improvement plan. And what we'll do is we'll just kind of walk through this, and then I also will have Kian available to chat with regards to the hydroelectric component of it. The items, so the items that in here in terms of admin, safety, operations and maintenance, those items, the numbers have been reflected based on the latest information I had seen with regards to their budgets. Those components don't come out of the capital program. They don't get funded by the property taxes, but they're capital components within the operating budgets of maintenance and operations, which is why some of those items are in here. But anyway, we'll go ahead and go through the engineering department's 5-year CIP, which is reflected in the overall number of the just over $6 million that we have.
I have an overarching question.
Yeah.
On these FATR numbers, the project numbers, can you just let me know what is the strategy for some of these numbers? Some of them are 1,000 numbers, some are 6,000, 2,000, 5-digit numbers. There's 7,000. There's all different numbers. And is there a rhyme? Are these smart numbers? Is there a rhyme or a reason to them?
No, they're not necessarily smart numbers. Part of it is, we had a different numbering system before. Some of the 6,000 numbers, I think, have been around longer in terms of being a project that's been identified and have a number attached to it, versus the newer numbers are driven by the lower numbers, the 2000s, I think we're in the 2004s or 3s now, with the new FTARs that are generated. So part of this is just when they became a project. A lot of these projects can become projects and may have started working on them 5 or 10 years ago. Combi Phase 1 is a 6,700 number. We've been working on that for 10 plus years, right? So it's just, there's not a specific rhyme or reason as to why they're numbered like that, other than some of these are older when we had a different system.
Because there's like 201, 502, and there's, you know, some of them are really odd numbers.
Yeah.
Is that a different time too?
Yeah, those are all different times, different systems, how we set things up before.
There's only a couple of them are that many numbers. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, but those are probably in the hydroelectric department. There was a while when we started hydroelectric department numbers with the year and then the project number in that year. So we've since integrated
Gotcha.
systems and
Okay, well, that makes sense. All right, thank
They're
you.
all same system now. Yeah. And obviously, as we move forward with the CMMS and the ERP stuff, they will all be under the same program. Okay, so we'll get into the engineering component of it. Treated water pipeline replacement projects. So what I show here for the 2021 budget are 6 projects that we'll either be working on and constructing or have been started. We've got the Christian Life Way, a lot of that 4-inch AC pipe. These projects are driven by a priority system that's set up from ops and maintenance. They develop the project priorities, the projects that they feel are most important to make sure they can continue to operate and run their system. And so we're driven off of that. And so these items that you see here in this 2021 budget are items that are high on their priority list. And so that's why we're focusing on those. So as you can see, we've got Christian Life Way, which is a pipeline replacement. These are all basically existing pipeline replacement projects. You'll see that Laura Acres, for instance, is a project where the main actual construction is going to happen in 2022, which is why the 1.5 million is in there. But the 150 we have here will be for design and CEQA, et cetera, that we'll be doing next year in anticipation of getting the plans together and ready to send out for construction ultimately in 2022.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Are these listed in priority now as like the Highway 49-1, Meadowbrook 2? Is that how they're listed this year in priority?
Yeah, effectively, yes, correct. And that comes off a priority list of projects from ops and maintenance.
Okay, because last year's CIP, the numbers were 5, 13, 11, 7. So they were they bumped up 13 and 11 down to 1 and 2, I guess, or 2 and 3.
Yeah, those things change, right? As you may have a project that's on the list that may be 20th on their list, and now suddenly we've got a blowout or we've got a problem where things are happening and they're having to go out there and deal with it more often, then that moves it up. So this is a living document. I can tell you that in January we may have a project down below that suddenly needs to be pushed to the top, which is going to push one of these other projects off until the following year or more. So this is what we're anticipating being able to do. This is highest on their list of things to do, with the understanding that changes on a yearly basis, right? These things move around as the priorities change based on our system.
And how old, like the Highway 49 and the Willara Acres, it's replacement. How old are these pipes? What are they? What are they made of? How old are these pipes? Because typically
So those are both AC pipes. Actually, let's see. I take that back. Christian Life Way may actually be ABS pipe. That was installed back in the day. Laura Acres is AC pipe. A lot of it's 4-inch pipe that serves a large community, hydrants, et cetera, right? So then issues with stuff going on out there. So yeah, so it can vary, and
And none
typically
of
these
them
old
are-
ones are old pipes, right? They're either gonna be steel, or like I said, I think Christian Life, might even be ABS. So, part of what I'm hoping to bring to the next engineering committee is a detailed couple of sheets and pictures of these projects. Ultimately, we want to have all the projects in that sheet, in that list, but for right now, what we're trying to focus on is the 2021 number. So, at the next committee meeting, my anticipation is that I'll be able to present that to you, and it'll show you Christian Life Way. What are we proposing to do? Why are we doing it? What's the reason? What type of pipes there are? That kind of stuff, so that you all have a better understanding of what these projects mean, because you can't get a lot of information from the detail, but we also can't write a paragraph or two for each one, right? This gets to be a big document. So I think that's a key piece of information that the committee and ultimately the board will be able to have as we move forward, which we haven't done historically in the past.
So where are these projects on this little map that you prepared for me? And I super appreciate you doing that.
Yeah, absolutely. So do you want to go ahead and pull up that PDF map so that we can show that? So Director Peters, that map that we'll pull up here in a second shows the list of projects there on the bottom right, and there's a number associated with it, number 1 through whatever that number is. I can't read it. Oh, wait, I got one here. 37, yeah, thank you, 1 through 37. So, you can start to look at, the stars, and they have numbers associated with them, and you'll be able to look to see that project and that star in terms of where it's located. I think Lower Acres, that would be up in,
Can you use,
Highway 49 near Lime Kiln Road.
can you put to it, please?
What's that?
Can you use the pointer and move it to the dot? Yeah, there we go. So where's
Yeah,
the
can
lower?
Where's you want me to do it?
Oh, you can't see that on the screen.
Want me to go over there and do it? Okay.
No, you have to talk.
I gotta talk. Okay.
So,
It's right there, can't you see?
give us the pointer, the red pointer.
Yeah, hand me the pointer and I'll try to focus
I
in for you.
realize that, but you can scan scoop.
Thank you.
Yeah. Give us just a quick second here and we'll,
Oh, technology, there you go.
yeah, you bet.
So each one of these yellow dots is one single project?
Each of the blue stars, the yellow dots are just showing you communities, so you have a general idea where things are. But the stars are the actual projects, and they've got the number next to the star, and that correlates to the actual list there on the right.
Wow. It's just very, very tiny.
Yeah, you should be able to scroll up.
There we go. Oh, perfect.
Yeah, right. Let's see, you wanted to talk about, Christian Life Way?
That would be number 1 somewhere?
Yeah, that's right here.
Uh-huh.
Hold on, let me scan it for the folks here. It's right here. So it's right almost in the middle of the screen right now, right there where the pointer is.
Okay. This is really
And then,
helpful.
yeah, so then like another project would be, well, you see there just to the right of that is number, what is that, 5 or 6? You can then correlate that to the,
That's Osborne Hill.
That's Osborne Hill?
yeah, that sounds right.
Okay.
And so we got it,
There's a legend at the bottom.
yeah.
It's a little awkward because this
Yeah.
was just finalized this morning, but there's a legend at the bottom, defines what exact project it is. That doesn't have to do with necessarily the priority, it's just how it's numbered in the page, right?
Right, so what this list is, it's all the projects shown in the 2021 CIP.
Right. That are being funded. That are
That we propose to fund for next year, correct?
And it's based on location, based on division. So each color is a different
Right.
district division, kind of indicates generally where those projects are located.
Right.
and how many per each division that the 2021 budget is anticipating completing next year.
And you can
Or
see
beginning. I'm sorry, beginning.
And they're pretty spread out, right? There's projects in all divisions proposed for next year.
But only 1 through 7 are actually proposed to be done. Have budget for the next year.
No. So these 27 items that you see are all projects in the 2021 CIP. So we haven't gone through all of them yet, but you've got 5 or 6 in the treated water pipeline. I've got 3 in the PRV program. I've got whatever it is, 5 or 6 in the raw water. I've got so many in the non-programmatic. All of those that I've shown for 2021 projects are listed here. So these are all the projects that we anticipate building and working on in 2021.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Right. Yes.
Yeah. Is there anything else within the treated water pipeline program that you wanted to see or talk about specifically?
There's 3 of them clustered right there in Division 3. The Willara, it looks like. So what are those 3 right there in the middle that you started with? 14, 4, and 13.
Oh, right down there. Yeah, so one of those has got to be Lower Acres, which is off of Lime Kiln, right? Is that Lime Kiln? So 4 is, scroll over, Joanne, so we can see so 4 is the Lower Acres, which is a subdivision there, and then you have 14 and 13. So 14 is the Kyler and 13 is the Maven. So there's a treated water system and 2 raw water systems that are being worked on in that particular location.
Because the Maven had, so what are we doing on Maven? We've spent a lot of money on Maven last year and the year before.
Yeah, and we got to spend some more on it.
It was a canal encasement, so to leave a bottleneck.
Yeah, and same with the Kyler, right? There's some restrictions in that facility that we still have to deal with.
So these areas have both treated water and raw water available to them?
So I don't know if Lower Acres has specific access to raw water. That maybe it's a subdivision that may just be getting treated water only. And likewise with the locations of the Maven and the Kyler, there's not necessarily a treated water line that's available to the property owner. They're not necessarily able to access both. It just looks close because it's on a map. But when we go into the details of the projects, you'll see that there's not treated water lines or raw water lines running in all directions out there.
And are any of these facilities, particularly, I guess, treated water, upsizing in anticipation of future growth, or is it?
No upsizing in terms of future growth, but upsizing in terms of the fact that a lot of it is 4-inch AC pipe that feeds a development. So we would be upsizing to 8-inch pipe to allow for adequate fire flow out of the hydrants.
To our standards.
And to our standards, which is basically 8-inch pipe is the minimum that we want to install.
Do they already have hydrants in them?
We do, that come off of I'm trying to think if those may or may not be wharf hydrants, but they come off of 4-inch AC pipe. So even if we have hydrants there, the flows and the ability to get water through them are relatively small.
And so we're going to be buying hydrants and putting in fire capacity for them at the same price.
We'll be installing our 8-inch pipelines and replacing hydrants as needed. If they're already a dry barrel system, then we could potentially leave them. If they are a wharf or a wet barrel system, we will be replacing them. Correct. No other questions? We'll show let's see where we are here. The next one down on page 2 of the CIP, which is the PRV stations. You see that we've got 3 there. 2 are just basically PRV replacements, bringing them above ground, bringing them to our standards. I think, one of them is a 4-inch versus a 6-inch, bringing them up to all our standards in above ground facilities. They're old, need to be replaced. The Bergeron Lane is actually one where we're getting rid of the PRV. We touched base on this a little bit in the engineering committee. We're gonna be extending a new water line up the road, to serve the existing customers, but we're also tying into a pipeline just above it to allow for better looping of our system and flows through. And so that's why it's a little bit more money, because there's actually pipeline involved. We are hoping that this may be a project that maintenance will take on and put into their schedule for next year, which would be awesome, but if not, then we would look to have a contractor work on that.
Did we do any PRVs last year? Because it looks like it's all the same or on the same list as we're on last year.
So we do have a couple that we're working on and finishing up that will get constructed this year.
Okay, because the Dorsey was number one. It was 1, 2, it follows exactly the same ordering of last year's, except for they put in Silver Lane between 2 and 3.
Right. So part of the problems that we have here is we're going to an above ground facilities, which typically require additional right-of-way, which can delay our abilities to, the design part's pretty straightforward, but the ability to actually get on the ground and do it is not.
And so it's not necessarily the facility is undersized or failing or anything. We're just bringing them up above ground. Is that correct?
Well, they're also based on their age and their need to be replaced, right? There's a list of PRVs. There's a lot more PRVs than what you see on the CIP list. They're all below ground. Those all need to be replaced, but these are given a higher priority based on information from operations and or maintenance. And so when we replace them, we bring them up to our current standard, which is above ground, typically 6-inch minimum, 6 and a 2, something like that, depending on where we're at in the system.
I didn't hear you. Did you say, because number 1, 2, 3 are still on the list from 1, 2, 3 last year? Did we do any PRVs last year?
Well, so we're working on these in terms of PRVs completed last year or this year. You're talking about this 2020 year or 2019?
2020.
2020. I don't believe we've done any replacements yet this year for 2020.
So is Laura, if I can ask, is the question that you're asking, Laura, can I ask the question you're asking is that on the engineering status report, which is work that we're doing now on 2020, there's Bergen Lane PRV, there's Silver Way PRV. Those PRVs are also scheduled for 2021 budget number. Is that kind of the question you're getting at as to why that is the case?
Right. We had budget in 2020 for all of these with the exact same priority except for Silver Lane. And now we're putting new money again this year. Is it the same money we're rolling over, or is it?
So it wouldn't necessarily be rolled over unless we encumber the money prior to the end of this year. So if we can't get to these by the end of this year, then it would be in next year's budget. And realize that if Dorsey Drive, if we get our right-of-way squared away and we get everything done and we can build it this year, we would do it. That then comes off the list, and then the one below Silver Lane would be the one that we would work on next year.
So leapfrogging ahead, just saying this is kind of out of order, but specific to Silver Way, on the engineering project status report, that's at 10% design at the moment. If we get to the place where we can, there's easement issue with that. If we can get to the place in 2020 that we can move forward with replacing it and signing an agreement in our contract to encumber the funds, then the 21 budget line item will move to the next line down.
Correct.
Right?
Correct.
Where we can encumber that for 2020. But right now, we're just assessing that 2021, we're going to get to it because of some above ground easement considerations that we don't have currently yet.
And if we don't spend it in this year's budget, then it just goes into the reserve box.
That's right.
Or it goes into, well, we find out that at the end of the year, every bit of this money in this year's budget goes into other projects at the end of the year, and then we put new money into it next year's budget. That's where I'm going with this. Is that,
Or it goes into reserves and we don't spend it.
I'm sorry?
Or it goes into reserves from this year and it's unspent.
Well, I've recently found out that no money goes back into reserves. At the end of the year, they check how much money is left and they put them into other projects, just like we discussed earlier.
That's not always true, or the case.
Okay, I'm heartened to hear that.
Okay, so we'll move on to the next one then, the raw water replacement. Again, you see, the projects that we have listed there. One is like Santini Siphon, you know, we're working on that currently. If we have money available and we get the easement squared away and finish up design, we could start constructing that this fall, this winter. And if so, then depending on when that happens, if this budget already is approved by the time we encumber the money, if it's approved in October or November, and we encumber the money in November or December, then we could encumber this coming year's budget, the 2021 budget, to do the construction. If not, there's money potentially sitting in last year in the 2020 budget that we haven't utilized that we could build it. So that's why that one's sitting in there, but you'll see that Doty North is not in there because we anticipate Doty North to be out to bid and be built this fiscal year. So that's why it's not sitting there. So anyway, these are the projects. What you'll see is the big reduction is the South Yuba repairs, the canal. We just got $50,000 in it for next year. And then we start to see the number higher as we move out, partly because we still don't own the facility, and partly because we're working on that overall, GHD is working on that overall study to talk about what we need to do and how we need to move forward with that facility.
And until that deal is complete, it's PG&E's responsibility.
Correct. Right.
So why should we be budgeting a ton of money for something that's their responsibility?
Right. Correct. With the anticipation that someday it will be ours.
We're
Not gonna be able to ignore.
We're hopeful that we can push that out as long as possible.
Yeah. So again, you can see there, some of these, projects are multi-year projects. Some of them we think we can do in a single year. So it's just
Can we look at the map and see where these are in the map, please?
Sure. Well, Santini is down in Placer County.
Look on, scan into the legend, find the number,
11?
11, gonna be right there at the bottom, right there,
and Doug's got it on his red cursor.
right there.
Mhm.
So that's,
In South Yuba, it's up.
yeah, South Yuba is not in any specific director's
Oh,
division,
it's not even in the district. Is that right?
correct?
And then and Maven and Kyler are right there where the other two were.
Yeah,
Okay.
Maven and Kyler are up there near the War Acres where you saw that. And then you've got the Haight Canal, which is also down in, that's probably a 15, is that 15 on this drawing? Yeah, Haight Canal's 15, or 16, whatever that number is. I think it's 15. That's down in, obviously in your
Mhm.
division as well.
And Pet Hill?
Pet Hill,
Um,
let's see, Pet Hill is, what number is Pet Hill?
16?
15. I think Pet Hill is go up.
Oh, that's Division 5.
That, right there?
Pin Valley, okay.
Yeah.
And China Drop? This is so helpful. Thank you so much. It's really nice to be able to see where these are.
Yeah, let's see, which number is China Hill?
17?
I think China is up, yeah. Do you see it?
That'd be Division 1.
Yeah,
That's close.
there it is, right there.
Okay, yeah, okay.
No, it's not. So anyway, that's up in that direction, right on the border there.
And that serves the Railroad Commission lands.
Yeah.
It serves out of district,
Oh, for like Smartsville?
correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and then the Techite one is,
That's up here, that's probably Division 1. It's up that direction. Which one's Techite? What number is it on the? Should be
17?
should be up in here.
Is that a little clipper?
Yeah. Scroll down the number for Clipper Creek, 18.
That's out of district.
18 should be up farther. There you go, right there.
Cooper Creek is out of district? Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's right up in there. And that's a huge section of Techite pipe, almost 8,700 feet of Techite that we still have in our system. And Techite is a horrible, horrible pipe.
Is it under a lot of pressure?
I don't know what all the system pressures are in there specific,
Not a huge amount.
but it's not a very high pressure system, but Techite doesn't necessarily care that it's high pressure. Techite just tends to fail, it just fails abruptly. We don't typically get leaks in Techite, we just get a failure, or it'll break.
So it's preventive maintenance. It's essentially preventive or averting trouble.
Yeah, it's like a ticking time bomb. The sooner we can replace it, the better it is for us.
We've been replacing the Techite pipe
Yeah.
in that system for the last 15 years, little by little.
Okay.
You can't
All right.
really fix it, replace it.
Yeah. Thanks.
Okay, so we'll keep going then. The next page, which would be page 3 of the CIP.
I'm sorry, I had one more question about the Maven. So we were
Sure.
talking, you said the Maven, we've spent $1 million on it between 2019 and 2020. And now we're proposing another 900,000 on it. So it's not near done, or what? It's a $2 million project, or what's going on with that?
Well, in terms of what the overall project was, or is?
We spent 928,000 in 2019. We spent only $826 this year to date, and now next year we're going to put another 100,000, then another 800,000 in 22. So that seems odd to me.
Why is that? These canals are miles and miles and miles long, right? So we have multiple locations within a facility that has problems, whether it's leaking, whether it's overtopping, whether it's restrictions that or put moratoriums on the facilities, et cetera, right? Those, just because one canal sees 3 or 4 projects, this canal may be 15 or 20 miles long, which just means that it's got multiple things to deal with, right? It's no different than any other system that we have. We've got, the Haight Canal, which has multiple siphons in it that need to be replaced.
And the Camp Far West Canal.
Camp Far West Canal, right? There's different.
It's been on the list for
different
years.
pieces. Yeah. We got 450 miles of canal.
Right. So I'm just, we put all of these, it seems like certain canals get lots and lots and lots of attention and other canals get no attention.
Well, that gets driven, so these projects get driven by ops and maintenance, right? So they're the ones out on there operating these systems, running these facilities, maintaining them. They're telling us that these are the projects that need to be done first.
Huh.
We're a customer service program, right? The engineering department isn't operating these facilities. They're telling us what they need to have fixed and what their priorities are in terms of getting these things fixed. We then take those projects and get them completed. But it's all driven off of the operations and the maintenance of the systems.
Well, my recollection on the Maven was that there were severe system bottlenecks in that system, that there was a very long waiting list of people who wanted water and couldn't get water for 20 plus years. And so this project is to basically address those issues, the bottlenecks and the waiting list.
Moratoriums, yeah, and on their list of projects, right, the moratoriums are high on their priority list because of the fact that folks want water and can't get it. Doty North is another prime example, right? That's high on their list because there's a moratorium in the facility. In addition to the fact that the facility needs to be replaced and it's old, it's also limiting in terms of being able to serve our customers. We
We have a 100,
Okay.
we have a 100-year plus system out there. And at any point along a canal, you have the ability for failure or consideration of maintenance and operations and repair. And this, like Doug said, this is a very shortened list of the laundry list of repairs and maintenance that must happen on a given year, decade. So we prioritize them as best we can based on staff on the ground looking at these and have eyeballs on them every day. They bring these requests back to engineering through the process, and we then prioritize those and put them on the ground.
And also, Director Peters, once we get our CMMS up and fully running, I believe we will have a better handle on managing these assets.
That's great, because I think a lot of these are not necessarily risk-based decisions, and so I'm happy to hear that, Marvin. Super happy to hear that.
I mean, it's taking a little time, but we're gonna get it up and running.
Yay.
Well, we're saying that some of these projects aren't necessarily risk-based, they're based on, this ability to serve water and meet demand, and that's not really a risk issue. That's actually just trying to serve our customers, or potential customers. Which I believe we have a duty to do.
Okay. If no other questions, then we'll move on to the next one, which is the backbone extension. And you can see there that as we discussed earlier in the budget for 2021, we've got no monies allocated for the VET program. And coming to 2021, we'll be working on some stuff in this year's budget, and then start back up in 2022. Community investment, same idea that we talked about, which is no money in it for this year. And so we'll push that out into the next year, and then depending on ultimately in 2022 how much money is budgeted into that program, whether we could construct the next project in 2022 or if we'd have to potentially wait to 2023 to be able to do that. Same with some of the hydrant replacements. Part of that community investment was replacing wharf hydrants. We've got a ton of wharf hydrants in our facilities that we're trying to slowly switch over, and so we won't be doing any of that work in this coming year either.
Is anyone sharing the costs of those replacement of wharf hydrants, or are we just doing it out of our ratepayers' budgets?
Say that again, you broke up.
Is
Okay.
anyone cost sharing the replacement of those wharf hydrants, or like community homeowners associations, or communities or counties, or is anyone helping us offset the costs of those replacements of those fire suppression facilities?
No,
Some of that comes out of capacity fees, doesn't it?
it can.
It can, but does it?
Capacity fees. Yeah.
But how much?
Well,
We've had
so
0.2% growth. A lot of capacity fees, I don't think. The county has 0.2% growth. And if there's 0.2% growth throughout the county of Nevada County.
Yeah, but that's not a direct correlation to the number of services that we may receive in a given year, right? Our number of meter installs is higher than that point-something%. I don't know what that is off the top of my head. I know Chip would be able to answer that better. So just because the overall growth is less, doesn't necessarily mean that the number of new services equates exactly to the same overall growth within the county growth rate, right? So,
why wouldn't it?
well, because you got existing facilities, you got existing pipes in place, you got a vacant piece of land, you got a lot that suddenly gets developed by somebody. So that lot's been sitting there for the last 20 years, and now somebody's decided to build a house on it. You're going to install a meter,
I
stuff
see.
like that. So.
No, people are moving here, so, okay, all right, that's fine, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Extended CEQA, again, we talked about it. It's just for the Banner Cascade project. We got two more rounds of that, and then we'll be done with that. And so you'll see that we've got it in this year and in 23, and then We won't see any additional ones unless we have other projects that we ultimately have to do some kind of an extended CEQA monitoring program, depending on the project. And then again, sediment removal, like we talked about, we showed nothing in sediment removal for this coming year, 2021. We start to put that back in 2022. Again, I think when we do this study and have the further discussion, then we get a better feel for how the board wants to move forward with this component, right, with this issue that we're dealing with sediment in all our facilities and how we want to handle that. And so that report is going to go a long way to give us a better direction on how we want to move forward with it. Because it's, as we've talked about before, it's incredibly expensive to remove sediment from a reservoir. And the volume of water you get back from the removal of the sediment is considerably expensive. You know, $20,000 to $30,000 an acre foot quickly doesn't make a whole lot of sense, right? So we got to figure out how to handle this thing and how we move forward and deal with it and continue to be able to operate the facilities that we need to operate. But for next year, there's nothing in the budget for that.
And did you say that the staff is going to do most of it, and so that's going to come out of the engineering budget, the couch cushion money of engineering, or is it going to come out of the operation? It's going to come out of the engineering budget, this year's budget?
So the staff time comes out of our salaries, right, out of our operating budget. The bathymetry work that we talked about will come out of the sediment removal program, where there's money currently sitting in this year's budget.
Okay.
No questions there. On to page 4, which is the non-programmatic. A couple things we've talked about. Obviously, for next year, we've got Combi bypass finishing up. We've talked about this before on the engineering committee with regards to some road improvements and stuff we're going to have to deal with, just with the impacts that we've caused to the private roads out there while we built this facility. So we'll get it all finished up in April or May, then we can come back in there and do some repair work. Hemp Hill, we would expect at some point in the next year to start the design work on whatever alternative or option that the board ultimately chooses for the project.
And so for the construction of Hemp Hill, we have $2 million budgeted. Is that correct?
You've got 1.5 and 2 million. So right now, in the 3-year window, we've got roughly 3.5 million. That's really just a placeholder right now, right? Because we need to, when we ultimately figure out what the alternative is and what we're going to do to build out there, then that's going to get adjusted as we move forward in the future. And by the time we start developing next year's budget, we'll have a much better idea what that's going to look like. So for next year, for 22's budget, I'm sorry. For next year, 21, we've got the 300,000 in there, and that would be for design work, et cetera, that we may need to be doing based on the results of the CEQA analysis. North Auburn lift pump stations, we're going to new generators, so we won't have a PSPS problem anymore, as well as putting VFDs on the pumps to make them more efficient, et cetera. So those are kind of the big, Lake Wildwood is the other larger project that we'll be doing next year, and those were the upgrades that were identified in that study that was done a few years ago for Lake Wildwood. That's updating the drying beds, the backwash, as well as the canal intake screen, et cetera. So we anticipate being able to put all that together and get that updated next year. And then a couple of them is just starting to work on them. Centennial is another one I wanted to highlight. I proposed 50,000 in Centennial for next year. Based on how COVID and everything else is going, I don't anticipate that there would be a lot of consultation effort at this point, nor do I see any additional consulting services going on at this point. So 50,000 in there. You know, water rights, I think we paid 20-something last year, so we're going to have to pay an X amount, whatever increment that is, for this coming year, and that's the majority of what that is. there could be some minor discussions. We typically reach out to the tribes every so often just to see if they want to meet. So a little bit of consulting time with that, but it's pretty minor. Any questions on?
I have just a couple of, I have a high level question. Both
Sure.
in the treated water pipeline replacement as well in the non-programmatic budget. Like in the treated water, there's the Peninsula Campground and Jackson Meadows Campground. We just did the Greenhorn is that, we just did one, right? But anyway, and then in the non-programmatic, we have the Loma Rica seismic, and we have the anyway, so we have, isn't our recreation facilities, did we have recreation facilities, were we required to maintain recreation facilities before, or do we maintain our recreation facilities because we have to, because of our FERC license?
All of the above.
Yeah, everything. We definitely maintain them for safety and drinking water, for our water quality standards, but we also maintain them for our FERC regulatory component. And it's a business line of ours in order to maintain it. So kind of everything.
Over the years, we have taken control or purchased. We've purchased more of the campgrounds. When I came on the board, we didn't own any of the campgrounds at Rollins, and they were controlled and maintained by concessionaires, and we supposedly received some rental income, which they pretty much always cheated on by keeping double sets of books. So we gradually purchased those campgrounds. So at Rollins, actually we did own the Scotts Flat ones at that time, and at Rollins we purchased Peninsula, we purchased Orchard Springs, we purchased Long Ravine, and so there's just one there that's controlled by a concessionaire now. So the answer.
No, that doesn't.
Yes.
Would we be in the recreation business if it weren't for our FERC license?
No.
Did you say no?
No, correct.
Right, and so my question is, why are the water ratepayers paying for FERC license obligations? Shouldn't that come out?
The historical trend has been to try and get recreation to pay its own way, and whatever deficit occurred, which occurred yearly, Hydro was picking up the tab. So the ratepayers are not paying for the recreation. So you're absolutely wrong.
But engineering is paid by ratepayers. The 10151 is ratepayers pay for all of the engineering, is my understanding from what our budget, from our rates thing. Maybe is that incorrect?
What's that?
That's not what the transfer in from Hydro every year covers, is those expenses. There's also a line item in the Hydro budget.
I can't hear you.
There's also a line item in the budget, the hydroelectric department budget, that shows the transfer into recreation. I believe it was on the order of $300,000 this year. I don't know if that's for sure, but I believe that's on about the same cost as this year that covers those costs.
But this is in the water budget. This isn't in the recreation budget, is my understanding. Aren't we still in the engineering budget? And these still fall under 10151?
In the direct Peters, the capital program is all covered by property taxes, not ratepayer rates. So even though this infrastructure is at the recreational site, it is in the capital budget. And all of the capital budget is paid for by property taxes, not ratepayer rates.
Oh, all of this whole 5-year CIP is property tax money?
Yes, the entire capital budget is property taxes. Water budget, that is. The all water budget is property taxes. And even recreational capital projects are still covered by Hydro. So even you see recreation's capital budgets about $300,000 a year. hydro covers that through transfer into recreation. So the water ratepayers is paying none of this capital program is being paid by water ratepayers.
And you can see that in the bottom of that page 4, which is why it's got the engineering capital, the reserves, and then the tax revenues. That all, those items add up, right? So I'm proposing the $6 million in this year, which means 7.7 is going into the water reserve, because that's the difference of the 13.7 million in taxes minus what
It's not going to water reserve.
well, wherever in terms of
Yeah, in terms of this.
So all that money that we're spending in these programs all come from the tax revenue,
Not ratepayers.
not ratepayers. And the clarification that the Loma Rica is not a recreational facility item. That's the reservoir for our treated water Loma Rica treatment plant. That's the raw water storage, and that just popped up on our radar that it's insufficient in its ability to handle certain seismic events. So that got pushed up higher into the project list, just because that's coming to the forefront here shortly. We're going to have to start studying it and ultimately repair that facility, but there's no recreational facilities on it.
Okay, so only the engineering budget, the item 2 of this agenda, is actually paid for by water rates. Is that correct?
That's my operating budget. That's the salaries, et cetera, yes.
It's on in.
Correct.
Okay, okay. Well, thank you, because that was my next question: is how does this water reserve and tax revenue, these summaries, what they meant? So thank you, that
Yep.
clarifies. Thanks.
Okay. The next items, these are just the two kind of show water and maintenance. Again, those don't actually come out of the tax revenues. Those come out of the operating budget. They're just for items, capital items within waters and maintenances, and I just mimicked what they will be presenting. They haven't done it yet, right? They'll be presenting at the WHO and at M&R. So this is just reflective of what they're proposing to do. Basically, water has taken all of their programs out for this year that you see there, and then maintenance has reduced theirs by quite a bit, I believe.
So if I could just overlay that.
Yes.
This just, for our purposes, this is a reference that the engineering department is a customer of the water division, the maintenance, recreation. I mean, they provide a customer service function within the overall NID organization. So we're just listing it here as these elements come through the engineering department to help and assist those departments in doing any engineering capital improvements that they have to do.
It may, right. Some of these don't necessarily require us, but some do.
Yes.
But so that's 10171 on page 5 and 10191, these are coming out of the ratepayer budgets.
Correct.
That's correct.
Yep.
And so on 52915, the Bear Valley Steel Building for the upper country system,
Mm-hmm.
why would the ratepayers, everything upper country, I thought was paid by hydro?
No, the South Yuba Canal is a water facility. Water's responsible for maintaining that facility, and that building is being constructed in order to support the water maintenance activities that are required to keep that canal flowing. So the ratepayers are paying for that cost.
I thought the ratepayers don't pay until it gets to Rollins or Scotts Flat.
That's because until some point in the near future, we didn't own the South Yuba Canal.
Yes, that's absolutely correct.
I can't hear you, Ken. I'm sorry. I can't hear what you're saying.
That's correct. All right, that's correct.
There you go.
What's correct?
That currently we don't own the South Yuba Canal, so we don't pay for it. So when it does transfer, though, it will be picked up. That portion will be picked up by the water ratepayers.
So we took possession of the water at Scotts Flat. Now, with owning the South Yuba Canal, we actually take possession of the water up in Bear Valley.
But it says it's for the upper country system, and I thought you always said, oh, we get such a break because hydro pays for all the upper country facilities.
Currently, yes, And there will be a slight change to that, when we take over the South Yuba Canal. So currently, yes, Hydro pays for Jackson Meadows, Bowman, French Factory, Sawmill, the BS Canal, the Milton Bowman Tunnel, all those facilities are paid for by, hydro revenues.
Once we get the South Yuba Canal, water is responsible for all the way to the top?
No, the South Yuba, the incremental portion due to the South Yuba Canal.
Spans from the Bear Valley down to Scott Flat.
Yeah, basically, from the point where we took possession of the water in Bear Valley down to Scotts Flat. Previously, PG&E had paid for all of that, but now with the transfer of the $1 bill in a board meeting, we now bought a huge liability.
And that cost has not been borne by the district yet. Correct. Right? And so we anticipate that coming. This particular line item that you're referring to, which is a steel building, is an existing piece of property where NID acquired along with the canal system, and we are putting a new building in there in order to house equipment and supplies and materials and goods so that we don't have to travel the 50 or 80 miles from Grass Valley up to a place where it's needed or somewhere in there. It's up in the middle country where we can grab it from there and utilize.
Yeah, this will be flume wood, this will be backhoes, this will be flume sheets, it'll be all the equipment that's necessary to maintain that facility up there.
Well, it's really a state area.
So once we acquire the Deer Creek system and the South Yuba Canal, the ratepayers are going to take over and have to pay for the upper division waterways. Is that what you're saying?
No, only the South Yuba Canal.
Just
South Yuba Canal.
And this building is only for the South Yuba Canal.
You really need to study the schematic, Laura.
I do. I need to go up there. Greg, when do we go up there? All right. So maybe it's a schematic thing. I'll look at the schematic and I'll circle back. Thanks.
Okay.
So let's see, so that's, water and maintenance, and they'll be discussing this in a little more detail when they come in and bring their discussion on their budget. Is same with, recreation. You can basically see that recreation has no money sitting in there for this 2021 season. And Monica will be able to explain that a little more when she does she hasn't done her discussion either, right, so.
Correct.
So she's showing nothing there. The next one is, hydroelectric, and, I'll just kind of hand this off to Key and let him kind of go through it a little bit since they've developed this piece, and, we'll go from there.
All right, thank you. So just a high-level overview of the budget here. What you're going to see, a lot of these numbers are based around meeting regulatory requirements, and that's a significant portion of that dams and waterways budget. The rest of the projects are designed to improve safety, and there's a real focus on remote operability. We've also come up with a number of projects to try and address the insurance issue. One of the key things that the insurance companies are looking for is real-time monitoring vibration, the various systems in the powerhouse. So you'll see some money for that. I do want to make it clear that this budget does not include any capital projects associated with the new license. This is only the projects that are on the existing powerhouses there. So with that, walking through the budget, I hate to start on it, but the first line here has an error in it in the project number. Project number 2084 was the project that was used to purchase the property for the new hydro field office there. The actual construction, the design has been converted over to project number 2432. That's correct in the project status update, and we'll get that corrected in the capital budget when it comes forward to the entire board. But with that, you'll see that we've included another $250,000 in next year's budget to continue the design of that facility, and then there are no other non-programmatic budget items. Any questions about that? Okay.
So just to clarify, so you're saying this 2084 is in error, and the actual hydro office building is number 2432. Is that what you just said?
That's the correct number, yes. 2432.
Okay.
The 2084 was where we spent all the the costs to actually purchase. It was the purchase price, it was the appraisal, it was the negotiations for all of that. So that number hasn't been updated yet.
Do you know how much we've spent on that to date?
On the purchase price or the design and
2432.
construction?
2432.
I don't have the audit total. I can tell you we issued contracts totaling 225, just about 225, a little over 225,000 at the end of 2019. And then this year we've issued contracts for a total of about $13,000 moving forward with that design.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, moving into the powerhouse total budget, you'll see that we've got some money in here to start the Chicago Park powerhouse transformer replacement. This is design money. And then we're also working through, we're beginning the turbine overhaul project. There's a whole lot of design that needs to go into these over the next couple of years before the actual outage and the actual construction of these things in 2023. We continue to spend money on instrumentation upgrades. That's $100,000. There's no project number there, but for Chicago Park Powerhouse, this is a direct response to the insurance issues that we're having out there. The insurance companies want to see real-time monitoring of vibration, of cooling water flows, the various things that demonstrate that the powerhouse is functioning properly. We have some money to build the access road to the Columbia South Powerhouse for $200,000. I have left money in for the design of some of the Deer Creek Powerhouse improvements. That's the DCPH. If we don't take over the powerhouse, that money obviously won't get spent. We'll defer that for a year, but given the lead time on some of this equipment, the exciters, the breakers and whatnot, I think it's prudent to leave it in there, assuming that we will take over this facility next year, so we can get started on the design. I anticipate...
On the Deer Creek, do you have a feel? Do you think we're going to get it next year? Do you know when we're going to get that powerhouse or that facility?
You know, that's a magic 8-ball sort of question. I don't know. It's right now it's in FERC's hands, and I'm not sure what the holdup is there. They're just not dealing with it at this point. I think they've got other priorities, and so I don't have a good answer for that at this time.
Are we still thinking for the CPUC?
No, the CPUC is taking care of this.
That's done.
All FERC is our only holdup at this point.
Okay, they to basically break the license.
They have to split the license, they have to split this facility off of the other license, and then break out all of the requirements that are only Deer Creek specific from the rest of the Drum Spalding license, and put that work in.
Okay, if I may, you talked about the Combi South access road. Have we resolved the easement issues there?
I believe they're in process. I believe the engineering department has been working with the property owners and working towards a resolution. I don't know that it's complete.
Yeah, it's not complete. We have met out there with the property owners, identified the route that the committee recommended that we move forward with.
I remember there was one that ran close to one property, and the other, he had to go about through half a dozen gates. So which was the chosen path?
What's the alternative? You remember the alternative?
I don't remember the number, but it was the shorter.
It's the shorter route.
So not the gates.
Right.
Not the gates.
Correct. So it's the shorter route, but there's 2 easements that we have to obtain as we come off of that road to get to our property. And so we've met with those property owners. They seem to be receptive to that package moving forward.
That's fine. I just, that's a digression. I'm just curious. I remember all of that discussion. I was wondering where it was.
I believe there's on-site meetings coming shortly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good.
Okay, moving down the list here, I anticipate that we'll finish the installation of the fire suppression at the Chicago Park Powerhouse this year, and so we will move to the Dutch Flat Powerhouse next year. There's $250,000 in there for that. And again, we'll begin the cooling water system upgrades. This is the same sort of thing for the insurance company, where we'll be monitoring cooling water and the cooling water flows, so we can demonstrate in real time that the water is flowing, the powerhouse is appropriately cooled. So we'll start the design of that in next year and then finish that in 22. We'll begin the replacement of the Rollins oil circuit breaker. There's an older oil circuit breaker at the Rollins powerhouse, and we'll upgrade that to looks like a vacuum breaker, which is kind of the latest and greatest in technology. environmentally friendly. Our plan is to begin the design of the fire protection system at the Rollins Powerhouse, and then start gearing up for some larger work in the Rollins Powerhouse next year. That'll be relay upgrades, that'll be a balanced plant, PLC, programmable logic controller. We'll start looking at the governor there, and go from there. Next year will be a big year at the Rollins Powerhouse. Any questions about that before we move to the next page? Okay, moving down to page 8, you'll see this is where we have our larger dam jobs.
So to speak.
Yeah. Fair enough. The Scott Flat Spillway, we anticipate spending another $500,000 there. This is somewhat of a rough estimate at this point. We're going to need to do the physical hydraulic modeling of the spillway. That will start this year, most likely, assuming we can get approval from FERC and DSOD on the modeling plan. Depending on how long that takes, I'm not real sure how much money we're going to spend here, but it's absolutely proven to include some money there. Moving down to the Comey Dam Stabilization and Scour Protection Project, we anticipate that we will have the 30% design of this project completed this year. We'll hand that over to engineering, and then engineering will handle the final design, which we anticipate will cost $600,000. And then next year, we plan to check off a couple of projects that
I have a question about that one. Why are you handing it over to engineer? Why are you doing part of the design and then halfway through the design handing it over to engineering?
So the model that we're using at this point is we work with engineering as we come up with the design concept, and then once the concept is in place, then we hand it over to engineering for where they'll take over the project management. It's more of a shift in project manager who's responsible for it. It shifts from the dam safety engineer over to an engineer in the engineering department who will manage it through construction.
And is the engineering department involved in the initiation of it?
Yes, they'll review the concept when it comes in. They reviewed the consultant that was selected.
You already select the consultant before it comes to the engineering department?
The consultant was selected with the engineering department, so they were part of the review team that selected the consultant. Okay. So this will, the next projects here are the French Lake. This is the new gauging station, and some repair of the upstream lining and the training wall at the French Lake Spillway. So that'll check 2 projects off that have been hanging around for quite a while. Questions about those 2 projects? And then we have a fairly, a minimal amount on the lower division waterways repairs here. Well, actually, one of the meetings immediately following this meeting, I need to sit down with Doug and talk about some work that we need done out on the Chicago Park forebay, and the study we need done out there. This is some of the work that comes out of that is shown here.
Oh, wait a minute. Are you down on 52,922 already?
That's correct.
Oh, I did have a question. I had sent you a question about the budgets, and did you see that? I sent it to Greg.
On the French Lake job?
No, on the 52921 projects. It's the same projects that were budgeted in 2019 and 2020, and so then I looked at the expenditures to date on both of those 4 projects. In 2019, there was 800,000 budgeted, and between those 4 projects, which were the 4 that were budgeted in 2019. There was only 157,000 out of 800,000 spent, and in 2020 there was $1,545,000 budgeted, and the sum of all those 4 projects, 2020 year to date, was only $1,272,841, and that leaves $1,915,773. Does that roll over? So my question is, if we have 1,915,773 unexpended, and now we're adding a 2.66 million to that 1. 9 million? Is that correct?
No, so that's not, that's not how it works. And so there are a couple issues here. So, the numbers that you sent over earlier are only the spent amounts. They don't appear to include the encumbered amounts. And so on some of these jobs, for example, the Scotts Flat Spillway, which is 2094, the board approved a contract worth $790,883 in August of 2019. So that number is encumbered but hasn't been spent yet, and so as the project moves along, we'll spend it. But it's not shown in the number, your $157,000 from 2019. Does that make sense?
I
And
see.
then,
So you've encumbered it, and we don't see when you encumber money. We only see when you spend it. Is that?
Yeah,
Okay.
we've written the check, it just hasn't been cashed yet, and I guess that's not quite the
Right.
right analogy. We haven't physically written the check, but we've promised to do the work, so.
Right. And it won't show. Okay. This is Marvin's budget stuff. Right. Okay. I get it.
And
Thank
then
you.
the other thing that is that if the money isn't spent or encumbered, it goes to reserves. And so we need to rebudget it every year. So we can't just take what wasn't spent or encumbered in 2019 and add it to what wasn't spent or encumbered in 2020 and see what money's left. So we need to rebudget based on the best information that we have.
Well, okay. I appreciate that, but my conversations with Marvin is that at the end of the year, if it's not encumbered or spent, it gets put to another project. It doesn't get put back into reserves.
Directly, when we do a mid-year adjustment, the mid-year adjustment, it might move a particular budget to a particular another budget item. But even though if it does that, if that budgeted item that it moved to did not get encumbered, it's still going back to reserves. Our budgeting approach is a little different than the state. The state typically approves the budget, and that budget, whether it's spent or not, can roll forward to the next year. We don't, our approach is not like that. Our approach is that when we approve the budget, we approve the budget to spend that year. However, that budget does not get spent or encumbered, it goes back to reserves. That's our budget approach.
So we just don't track how much gets rolled back to reserves. We don't know. We don't know that much. We don't know how much doesn't get spent or encumbered.
Well, we know in the sense that, like, when we look at that account, we know what we've spent against that account. And then we know what we've encumbered against that account as well. So we know the outstanding POs against that account. So in that regard, we know what we didn't spend of that account and the budget. We know. But however, when the money rolls back into the reserves, it's not linked to an account. When it rolls back into the reserves, it simply rolls back into the overall pot to be able to be used next year.
Okay, because I've asked for, that report to know how much gets rolled back in the year, and it can't be produced for some reason. And so,
Yeah, exactly. Our system doesn't produce it like that because the departments, when they save money, it's not a saving against the department. It just goes back into, it's just like they didn't spend it. And it just essentially stays in your reserves. You didn't use it.
will that be different when we get our new system?
No, unless we change the approach that we're budgeting. So, because you think of your checking account, you got one pool of money in your checking account, and you might have bills that you're going to spend it against. But if you don't spend those against certain bills, they're not designated. They simply just stay in your checking account, and that's kind of how it works.
So even though our reserves are going down, 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 there's still money replenishing it. We just don't see it.
No, the reserves are going to go up, provided you're taking enough receipts. So even if you don't spend a budget, but you don't taking enough receipts, your reserves are going down. If you're taking enough receipts, like in Hydro's case, Hydro takes in enough receipts that if it doesn't spend what's in the budget, its reserves are going to go up because it's taking in excess receipts, provided we don't use too many to transfer into water. The water fund is not that case. The water fund, we're not taking in enough revenue for the reserves to go up. Even though you might be saving less by not spending, the reserves are still going to go down because the revenues are not big enough.
We're spinning off the topic of the engineering committee projects. I want to just be careful that this is
Thank you.
currently
I'm done.
discussion around projects themselves, not necessarily, the reserves discussion, the budget discussion. That's where we're at, but I appreciate Marvin's response. Does that help answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you. Let's move on.
Okay, moving on to the Upper Division Waterways projects. One of the key things that we'll take care of next year is the Rucker spill gate replacement. This is, we're looking forward to getting taken care of this one operationally. This is a real challenge. It's kind of the last stop in the system, and we are often out there in the middle of a rain on snow sort of event, trying to regulate the water, and this project will take care of that. We'll replace an existing radial gate with an overshot gate, so any excess spills will just go over the top. So really looking forward to having that done. And then we budgeted some money for the next category, I guess moving on to the SCADA communications upgrade totals here. We budgeted some fiber optic cable replacement in that last bucket there. This would be from the from the PG&E's drum 4-bay down to the Dutch Flat 4-bay. We're evaluating that project now, and I hope we can come up with a better solution than just running fiber, but we'll have to see how that shakes out. So with that, that's the hydro capital budget. Are there any questions?
On the water, Doug had done that summary, which I didn't really understand until you explained it to me. So did you save any? I mean, how much did hydro save over last year? Water saved, or is that in the water? Is that in that initial 45%?
Capital. Yeah, I think she's asking if you saved any money from your capital program from last year to this year.
No, actually, I don't have the number in front of me, but the hydroelectric department capital budget is actually up next year, largely as a result of the large dam projects that we're working on, the spillway at Scotts Flat, the French Lake repairs, and the Comey stabilization project are driving the capital budget, and it is up over last year's budget.
Okay, that's good. Thanks.
Okay, and then at the end here, overall on the last sheet, just kind of gives you a feel for our capital projects, and while we've shrunk them down in 2021, you see that we start to ramp back up here in the next couple of years. So, so it's just a big portion of that is hydroelectric. They got quite a bit of stuff coming up in the next couple of years, but just starts to give you a feel for the fact that we've got a bunch of capital improvements that we're going to have to be starting to deal with here within the next couple of years. So with that, any other final questions from the directors? Nick, do you have any?
No, well, we should take public comment.
Okay. So yeah, we've public comment. Looks like we got a couple of hands raised. So go ahead, Joanne, first one. Yeah, is this Sid?
Forgotten a few periods or comments.
Oh, it looks like she might be muted. Sid, hey, can you hear us now, Sid? Try, looks like she's still muted. There's a mute on it. Why don't you go, let's go to the next one first, and we'll get back to you, Sid. Apologize for that. John? Oh, he just got muted. No,
Good.
Sid. There we go. John?
Yes, thank you very much. First, I'd like to tell you that I appreciate the attention to the Lake Wildwood treatment plant. That's very favorable. I just had a question. In the previous budget document, it showed 450,000 budgeted for next year, and now it's at 600,000. Is this just more accurate budgeting, or was something else added to the mix of things?
Yes, it's just a little more accurate on the idea of what we think we need to get done out there. Yeah.
Okay.
So there's no additional items.
The second thing is you showed a map of the various projects, and I was wondering, can that be made available to the public?
Yeah, sure. We can put it on the website, I guess, is that?
Yeah, we can put it on the website.
Okay.
Perfect.
Yeah, that's something we can do, for sure.
Thank you very much.
Okay, let's try Sid, see if we can get Sid. Bear with us, Sid. So you need to unmute yourself, maybe star 6.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Okay, so sorry, you guys. I just wanted to make a quick comment, and I don't know if the time has passed, on the centennial budget. My comment had to do with hoping and requesting that NID keep the centennial spending to the minimum amount absolutely required legally. So 50,000 I see projected, and then 100,000 in future years. And I would just plead that the spending be kept to the absolute minimum legally required. And that's it.
Thank you. Any other questions? No, not seeing any. So we'll go ahead and close this item. Next item is the project status. Do we need to take a quick break, or? Yeah, okay. Let's take a 5 or 10 minute break. A 5-minute break, and then we'll come back.
Great. All right, thanks.
Okay, we're live again? All right. Okay, now we'll move on to last item, item number 4, which is project status. And a little bit different here is I'll go through these, and then I'll hand it off to Nathan, and he can kind of go through the hydro projects. So we'll, or Kean will. Anyway, we'll have hydro kind of talk about some of their projects and give you the updates on those. So we'll go ahead and get started. We're on page 1 at the top. Lidster. Yeah, they're basically tying in services now. I don't think they're completed yet, but they put a jumper in. So they've got the old line charged, the new line is in service, and now they're going through the process of switching the old meters over to the new pipe. That's just a time-consuming process to do that. So, but they're finishing that up, so that should be done here relatively soon. Apple and Annex, same type of thing. They're finishing up the pipeline component of it as well. That should be wrapping up here again shortly. Christian Lifeway, that's in design. We talked about the location of that. So we should hopefully have that moving forward and be ready to have that project constructed out next year. And then the Rough and Ready roundabout. So this is the one we talked about before. This is the proposed improvements for the roundabout at Rough and Ready and Ridge Road. Our existing water line is being impacted by it.
There's a PRV station there, or there's some sort of a vault there. Is that gonna have to be relocated?
I don't believe so. That's not, I don't know that for sure, Nick. But the pipeline itself, the existing pipeline is within the proposed roundabout. So we're gonna have to move that off, and then we've also had discussions about whether we wanna realign or adjust a portion of the canal that's in that stretch too. Maybe encase it, because we have some issues with.
It would make some sense to encase that, because that portion of canal is highly vulnerable to pollution.
Yeah, we get quite a bit of stuff in there. So.
A lot of people stop there and hang out.
So that's one of the things where we'll also be looking at, is whether we want to relocate some of that as well as part of this process. But PRV replacements, Cedar Ridge, we're working on the easement stuff. That seems to be the big one with regards to, with these projects. What I don't, okay, so when we have, East Ridge, Bergen Lane we talked about, and Silver Way also, so those are ones that we anticipate doing next year. Bergen Lane is the one that we're gonna get rid of the PRV altogether, extend a new pipeline, and then run it up to the top and tie into the system up above so that we get better, system looping and flows through that area of the system. Next is raw water, the Doty North. So I should be sending out, information to the pipe manufacturers this week, or first part of next week. We talked about the last committee meeting that we have, a potential issue in terms of steel pipe and the amount of lead time that we have to have. And so I'm going to move forward with the idea of us purchasing the pipe ahead of time, so that we can get that clock running, so that we can then, when we issue the contract, the pipe will be available and the contractor can do the work.
Do we have an estimate on cost on that project?
On the cost?
Yeah.
350, 400,
400,000.
somewhere in there, yeah. I don't remember off the top of my head. So yeah, so that's part of what we're doing is getting that pipe done ahead of time, just because otherwise it may potentially impact our ability to build it this year, because of the lead times that we're seeing. Santini siphon.
Question on the Doty. So that 400,000, was that just the pipe or the entire project engineering?
That would be the project, the construction.
Super, thanks.
So that contract's going to have to come back to the board for approval?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, the construction contract will. The pipe contract, I don't think so. The amount of pipe that I need to purchase, is probably well within the general manager's threshold number. It might even be within mine, but it would definitely be within the general managers that I think.
Oh, so the 400K doesn't include the construction?
It includes construction.
Okay.
So the construction contract will come to the board, but the pipeline purchasing doesn't necessarily meet a threshold that would require board approval.
Correct.
To be done within the general managers.
Okay.
Is that your question, Laura? Any other questions on Doty?
Nope, thank you very much.
Thank you. Santini siphon, the design is about done. We do have some easements that we're starting to work on for realignment of a portion of that, out of the front yard down along the edge and then into a Santini lane. So once we get that wrapped up, we've started to talk with maintenance about whether that's a project that they want to construct. So whether they can fit it into their timing. Obviously, once the irrigation season's over, they spend a lot of time mucking ditches.
Do you have a cost estimate on that project?
Yeah. It's right in that same number.
400,000.
Yeah, 350 or somewhere right in there, I believe, yeah.
Okay.
South View repairs. So hopefully the end of this month, we're trying to set up a meeting with PG&E for the consultants to have discussions on the South Yuba Canal maintenance before they actually go out and walk the site. And we're trying to do it all at the same time, so we're conducive of limiting how many times the consultants got to come in and out of the project site.
This is GHD.
Yeah, the COVID has kind of screwed things up for a little bit, so now vacations and other things have kind of, anyway, we're getting there. I think we'll probably walk it sometime at the end of this month or the first part of September. And then the outage for the, don't know yet. So then this fall, when we have an outage, then we'll do the tunnels. The consultant will walk the tunnels for assessment on those as well. And the Haight Canal, move forward with that. Maintenance is going to do that work, or at least a portion of it. We expect that to be done, at least some of it done this year. Probably the number one will get completed this year. I think 6 may not get done until next year, but that's right toward it.
Again, do you have an estimate on the cost of that?
I don't remember off the top of my head on that one. It's even less than the other two.
I have a question about that one, the Haight. So
Yeah.
it says canal siphon 1 and 6 replace, is it just replacing the siphons or what is that project? Aged into?
Yeah, It's basically replacing the siphons that are there now. Siphon 1, which is right at the head, almost at the head of the facility, that one needs to be replaced. It's in kind of a difficult location. It's at the base of a private dam, and it's wet. We don't know if it's our pipe doing some of that or if it's the dam doing some of that. So that'll get replaced, but it's basically just replacement of the existing siphon, and same with this number 6. It's replacing of the existing siphon. I think what we have at the end of number 6 is the canal goes into on a private property where there's I think it's a barn or a structure that's right to it, along with a couple other things. So me and Chip have been talking about the discussion of ending our canal just prior to that property, because they're basically the last property where they get water service, and then having a spill located there, and then we would just make deliveries at the end of that canal to that property, but not have to go across the property for that one service. So,
Are there additional services that could potentially hook up as a result of this project? People that haven't been able to get water previously?
I believe the Haight has a moratorium on it, yes.
Okay, so this will open up water availability for additional customers?
I believe that is correct, yes.
Great.
I think it's siphon 1 is the big limiting factor.
Terrific. Thanks.
Yep. So the next one's Lake Wildwood. Again, we've run into some issues with the right-of-way. It has to do with money issues, effectively. So we're looking now at focusing on the portions that are within this existing system further up that need replacement. Some of those were going to be replaced regardless. Some of these improvements are for this project. And so we're putting the package together to figure out the best pieces that we can build within the monies that we have available for this year's budget.
Which is about $2 million.
Yeah, I think it's like somewhere in there, 1 point something, it's right in there. And so we will get that out to bid by the end of this year, and take it to the board for award, and then the construction will most likely happen next year. But we'll get the money encumbered for this year.
So you're making headway on that easement?
No, so if...
Because phase 1 is that...
So the problem we have is the concern with regards to the valuation of it. So the process we have to go through when we do these things is we look at this is the particular location that we think is best. We get with the property owner, we go through it. If we can come to an agreement, awesome. If we can't come to an agreement, then we have to make a decision. And that decision is either, can we find another place that will work for us? Or is this the best location for the facility to be installed? And if this is the best location, then we start down the next track, right, which is going through the notice of intent to potentially have to do condemnation. But if we can find another location, then we can, and a property owner that's beneficial or willing to do that, then that's what we would look at. And that's partly where we're at now. We're looking at some of the other alternatives to see if we can make those work, and if we're any more effective with those potential property owners. If we get into a pickle where we have nobody supporting us wanting to put in our facility, then we need to make that decision on what we think is the greatest public good with the least private injury, and then we move that forward and bring that to the board for the board ultimately to make their decision as to whether we condemn that property or not. But we're clearly not at that point yet, so we're looking to see if we can relocate it in another spot, and if the property owners are favorable to that. And that just takes time.
But if their issue is money, relocating it's not going to change that.
Not on that property.
The location, they're objecting to the compensation.
Correct, but I'm talking about another property, not just on their property.
But they own that whole stretch.
Well, you can look at across the street, or you can look potentially down. Anyway, there's some things we're taking a look at. So that's where we're at this.
Okay. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, no. So it's just a process, right? These things aren't. Sometimes they go great, nice and smooth. Other times it just takes a little more effort, and effort means more time.
And so I have a question, because phase one that was actually approved is, and I thank you for updating the description, but it is 475 feet of pipeline and a PRV. And so that's what the board approved to move forward on. And if we can't move, and then in the comments, it says we're looking at doing improvements in the existing right of way. So if we do decide that, it's just going to take too long, or we're going to whatever with this easement thing, if you decide to move forward with these other improvements, would you come back to the board for approval?
So our thought process would be that we would make the decision to move forward with the other alternatives, staying within the amounts or the effort that we have within budget. We would then come back to the board and say, look, board, this is the recommendation that we have, is that while we're dealing with the right-of-way section and this component, that we can focus our attention on some of these other pieces and still work within our budget, and the board approved that. And we would probably do that, most likely, typically we would do that, we would go ahead and send out a bid and get that information. Then we'd come to the board and say, here's a recommendation of award, here's what we're proposing to do. Instead of building this piece first, we'll build this piece. It stays within the budget. This is within the monies that you've already talked about for this year, et cetera. And this is what we would recommend.
Okay, all right. Thanks for clarifying.
Yep. Next one's Kobe Phase 1. The contractors should start back up here in a couple of weeks. They'll be ramping up and working quite a bit more in September, getting the bypass installed and getting ready for October. We've got a 2-day outage for this year, so we'll get that taken care of. October 15th and 16th, I think, is slated. We'll turn the bypass in. It's a little more complicated this year. That's why we need 2 days. And then we'll start construction. And we talked about that we do have money set aside in next year's budget for road repairs. Portions of that road where we've been working on the treated water pipeline have not fared well. And so we know we're going to have to deal with those through the winter just to maintain them so folks can continue to drive in and out of their homes. And then next spring or early summer when we get done, we'll have to deal with that. And we met with the Road Association last night for Table Meadow. I think it's not called Table Meadow, Ranchos or something. Anyway, we met with the Road Association last night and talked to them about the road issues and what our plans are. So we're in contact with those folks and we'll continue to do so. Also Sierra Tank, it's in design still. We're starting to see some layouts for civil work, et cetera, but still on track to take the reservoir out of service in October and start constructing the new tank. We're looking at some blow-off valves temporarily that we might need to install, just because when we bypass the system, we can potentially overpressure it, so we want to make sure that we don't do that in a high-flow event. But that's just kind of all part of the process.
So this is a design build?
Yes.
The same contractors that did
It is.
the one up on Banner Mountain?
Correct.
Cool.
Okay. So the next page, page 2, Hemp Hill. So we expect the NOP out in September. We're starting to, I reviewed a rough draft of the IS that they did, and so they'll make some changes and some edits and some comments, get back to us on that and get that cleaned up. But we're still on track to do that, so that document will be out. They have, I believe, also started doing some of their survey work out there, and we'll continue to do that as well. So we are moving forward with that project. North Auburn Treatment Plant, this is the upgrade of the generator and the VFDs for the pumps. We do have the 18. Not everybody gets that, I imagine. Probably doesn't. The 18, I always laugh when I say that, I'm sorry. They're in there doing their design work now. We've got 3 locations identified for the generators and the control panels. We've got one we think is probably the most likely one. Also probably the most cheapest to construct, which is a double win. So we'll get that finished up here shortly, and then once we get those drawings finalized, then we can get that sent out to bid for the contractors to come and do that work. We're not going to get that generator installed before this year's PSPS event, but it will be done. be ready for next year's.
There aren't gonna be any PF.
That would be awesome. That'd be awesome. Pine Woods Pump Station, we're looking at, putting a generator in there, full-time. This is a raw water pump station that pumps up to E. George, off the Banner, Cascade Canal. So we're looking at that. We're also potentially looking at, some other alternatives in terms of the generator. It's a pretty tight location, so, we're just seeing what we can do and make things fit. And then Centennial, nothing's happened, in Centennial, since the last update that we've had. And we'll have another update on Centennial in September at the next engineering committee. It's gonna say the same thing, which is we've had no, there's been nothing done, since the COVID. The tribes have had, are not interested in having any discussions at this point, so,
I have a question.
yeah, go ahead.
Sorry. What division is Pine Woods Pump Station in?
Division 1.
That's one, yeah.
Okay. And on Centennial, I saw that on the warrants for tomorrow. It's a tomorrow question I had, but I'll ask now anyway. We did pay HDR for AV consultation. We just paid a warrant for AV.
Yeah.
When was that?
For, was it, I can't remember how much it was, 3,000 or 5,000 or something to that effect. So yeah, that was for work that was done in January at our meeting that we had with the tribes.
Wow, they're late in billing. Okay, that's fine.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, it just takes time for them to bill and then to get through the process, yeah. Okay, let's see where we at.
You say that the tribes aren't engaging. Is there any way to force that issue?
No, other than we periodically will reach out to them to just say, hey, we're here if you have any questions or you'd like to meet. And that's basically the extent of what we're doing right now.
So there's no way to push them?
No.
So they could stall the project forever?
No, because you have to engage in the process, right? Because we can, if you demonstrate that you've tried and you've been unsuccessful, that can be considered a consultation. And then we can say we are ending the consultation because we're not receptive of it, right?
Lack of due diligence.
Yeah, but at this stage of the game, that's not the case for the concern that we would have right now, right? Right now, we're still in the process, but that is a way to do that. That's why you keep track and record.
They cannot sit on the sidelines forever necessarily,
No.
as long as we try and engage them.
Correct. Nor have they been that way, right? We've been periodically meeting with at least two of the tribes. And then the other one that came on board, Rancheria, came on board in January. We had the meeting with them, so.
That's Shelley's group.
Yeah, Nevada City Rancheria. Let's see, raw water master plan. Do you wanna say anything specific?
Well, if you notice in the budget for engineering, there was some money in there for 2021. We've got some in the administrative funding for consultants on the raw water master plan. We anticipate bringing it forth and continuing that process moving forward after the urban and the ag water plans are put forth and to bed. So that would be sometime in the summer of next year that we re-engage with some of the outreach components that we heard from last board meeting, which will be amended to reflect the outreach component for the plan and developing that plan over the coming, short time, year and a half-ish. Still, timelines to be determined. We're just going to focus on the urban and the ag at the moment.
Thank you. That's the next one here is sediment removal.
Can I ask a question? So we're still on track on the hydrology?
I think we are. We're bringing forth, towards the end of this month, as we've stated before, we're bringing forth the hydrology, the demand, and the supply technical memorandum. That is an it's informing the actual raw water master plan. That's data information for us.
What's also informing urban plan?
It's also informing urban and the ag. It informs our rates. It informs many planning
and financial documents of the district.
And so that's scheduled for when?
The end of this month.
So at the August
26th?
26th.
26th, I think it's scheduled to be discussed
Okay.
with the consultant, from the consultant side. And then we will, the plan is to give those TMs to the public for a number of weeks.
So once it gets discussed in the board meeting, then it goes up on a website.
You got it.
Cool. Okay.
I encourage it to be 8 weeks, just if possible.
Yeah, we've got some timing issues on that. We're getting it as long as we possibly can in the public sphere, but then it continues to live there. It's not like we're pulling it down. There's just a timeline for when we plan to respond to it and begin working on the urban and the ag.
So that timing is determined in part by when the consultants that are going to do the urban and ag plans need the data.
There you go. More or less. Yeah.
Okay, sediment removal, we talked about, we're developing that study, so we've got some general, not a specific quote, but some general budgetary quotes in terms of what we think it costs for the bathymetry of the different reservoirs. Part of that depends on how detailed we want that to be, how much spacing and the gridding and stuff, so we're kind of taking a look at that to see what makes sense. You know, we don't necessarily need the Cadillac version. So we're looking at that, so then we can figure out what we ultimately want, and then we can send that out for formal quotes. But we would expect that to happen relatively soon, and then we'll bring that back to, I would assume it would be, well, I know it'll be within the requirement of the board to approve that. So we'd probably bring it to engineering committee with, looking for a recommendation, take it to the board, and then we bring it to the board.
So that's all done by boat, I assume?
Yeah, for the most part. On the bigger reservoirs. The smaller ones we can do internally.
Sure.
We can use our surveyors and put them out in their little rubber raft or whatever they need to do to go out there and, yeah, and do some of their work, so that'll be entertaining.
At the board, we did it with hip waders.
Yeah. No, I've done it with the boat and a hip wader.
You remember going out with Wayne Smith probably doing that?
I do. So Loma Rica, you see here that it's being sent out to quotes. So there's still about 5,600 yards that were removed last year that's still stockpiled and hasn't been placed at the airport site. So we're getting quotes to get that taken care of, to get that material moved from there to be its final resting place there at the airport. But we're not removing any additional soil out of the reservoir. This is just stuff that was still there that was piled up that didn't get removed. And then it also shows that for Newtown, but I've actually put that on hold, so it's just Loma Rica that we're going to be doing that for. It's going to be a relatively small amount, it's 5,600 yards. You just got to move it a couple hundred yards away to the airport and place it. So, so we'll be doing that, but that's the only work we'll be doing within that.
Thanks. So close.
It is very close. That's what made that option so cheap, was that it was a close deposit.
While we're here, I'll give you an update on this, on the Combi project. Yeah. That final report is complete, I believe. So our final Combi sediment removal and mercury remediation project, that final report should be uploaded onto the district website really soon. We're just finalizing it with NV5 at the moment. So look for that. It's coming. It'll be sent down to DWR for project final.
Who's going to buy all the dirt? I'm sorry, you don't have to answer that.
It's remote, far away location, and dirt during these COVID years has been not in high demand. So we're still working on that.
I'm sorry.
The removal part of the project and all of the activities are pretty much complete.
So the
I have a
next
question.
component is,
I
have-
on the sediment, I just want to put a plug in. I was out at the Valley View Reservoir the other day, and apparently that's really full of sediment, and the property right adjacent, I mean, right there wants the sediment, wants the dirt. And so I'd like to try and get it on the maintenance radar, because they say that the operator told me that it's been a long, you know, that we want to get that done. So I just a plug. That's it.
Yes. So part of this study, right, is we're looking at these, some of these smaller reservoirs to see if those are still facilities we want to maintain and operate. So yeah, so we'll have that discussion, and then once the study determines which reservoirs we want to keep and maintain, then we can start to look at doing that in terms of removal and whether maintenance does that, or that gets done by a contractor, et cetera, as we move forward. But
Do we have any idea of when that study will be completed?
no, so I don't have the feel yet for when the bathymetry work, how long that will take and what that will entail. I would think hopefully within the first quarter of next year,
Okay,
that we'd be ready to start to present stuff to the committee.
great.
So the next section is hydro. So we had talked about this last time about maybe having a hydro rep here to kind of go through some of these projects. And so I'll hand that off to Ken. And
Yeah, so we brought 2 hydro reps.
yeah, there you go, me too.
So I brought with me Nathan Earl. Nathan is a project manager in our department over on the hydro side of the house. I'll go ahead and run through the update this time, but he may give updates in the future depending on what the committee's needs are and how we work through this. So I'll keep it high level and move reasonably quickly. Just touching on the new hydro field office, we have preliminary designs for the building. We have preliminary concepts for the carbon sequestration of the forest there, and the solar panels. We're going to work to pull all of those together over the next couple of months, and I believe we will have a site that has a zero carbon footprint, which would be fairly good. It's fairly cool if we could build that and see how that goes. We are coming up on the hydro outage season, which means that a number of these big projects will get moved fairly quickly. So when we look at the Dutch Flat number 2 balance of plant project, that's going to go here during the outage in September. Same for the Chicago Park, portions of the Chicago Park instrumentation upgrade. Our plan there is to buy all of the equipment this year and then install it in the following year. There have been some delays to that as we navigate the COVID situation. Similarly, for the Chicago Park fire suppression project, that will get built during the annual outage this year, hopefully a little bit ahead of time, and then we'll commission its build after the outage. Moving along, the Bowman Governor was installed in June, so that project is complete, so we'll pull that off of future projects. Moving along, if there are no questions on any of those other jobs, I'd like to skip down to the dams and waterways improvements. We should certainly touch on the Scotts Flat spillway repair. We've done the crest stability analysis report, and that's being reviewed by the Division of Safety of Dams. The study did find it was stable, but there's always a lot of arguing over the specific parameters. And then we're currently working through the physical modeling plan. FERC and DSOD are reviewing that. It's a question of the scale of the physical model. We started with a 1 to 40. FERC and DSOD are pushing for a 1 to 25 or a 1 to 30, somewhere in that neighborhood. So it's a very, very large physical model that they want built. So we'll see where we're working through that one though. So the other project that'll move forward here very shortly is the Jackson Lake.
Can I interrupt just a second?
Yeah.
Are you on 52,921 now? Did you jump down?
I did.
So really on 10-2, the powerhouse improvements. So the really active ones right now are the first 3. Is that right? Combi, Replace Governor, Dutch Flat 2, Chicago Park, Combi Reservoir.
No. I was shooting to give a high level,
Yeah, I'm fine. I was losing track of you here.
okay, if you'd like to touch on each project, we can absolutely do that.
No, I don't need to do that. I just wanted to make sure I understood where you were.
Yeah,
So-
so I'd say that the first, the Dutch Flat Balance Plant Powerhouse is very active. The cooling water, the Chicago Park Powerhouse, the Columbia South Access is moving. Most of these jobs are moving. They're just,
Okay, that's great.
not like,
We're on 10-3 now. Okay.
So yeah, so I am now down on, under 10-3, the Jackson Lake Spillway Project. We have awarded a contract to that, for that. Hanson Brothers won that award. The total bid there was $68,000. We are struggling with the regulatory agency to bid on this one. Anytime you say you're doing work on a spillway, even though it's a fairly minor job, it's a $68,000 job, the regulatory oversight has become immense. And we're writing temporary construction emergency action plans, and we're writing inspection programs. And even though the inspection programs are fairly small, they are a document that has to be created, and it's really slowing us down. But we will get that built this year.
Do you need to you're doing the QSIP, right, then for,
Correct.
are you gonna need an inspector for that?
So FERC and DSOD have required full-time inspection for that. So I think we've got it handled. It's only a 2-week job.
Okay.
So I think we'll be able to handle it with hydro staff, but we hadn't anticipated needing full-time inspection for this job. We had assumed that we could go out and check rebar, check footings before they poured. So in the future, there's gonna be a whole lot more inspection needs for these dam safety jobs. I would anticipate all of these, next year, the French Lake jobs, when we get to building Scotts, when we get to building Comey, they're all going to require full-time inspection.
Okay.
It's gonna be a heavy lift, so. Those are the jobs that I wanted to highlight in this update. If there are any other questions, I'm happy to run through the other jobs, or we can ask Nathan for specific details, but otherwise I'll leave it there.
Any questions from the directors at this point? Okay. Any public comments on this item? Looks like I'm not seeing any, so we'll go ahead and close item 4, which in terms closes the meeting for today. Thank you both, directors, for being here, giving good information and feedback as we move through the budget process. And with that, have a good afternoon.
Thank you very much for bearing with me. This was a pre-trial for tomorrow, so I had to kick all the girls out of the house. So that was good to find out on this meeting instead of tomorrow.
Fair enough.
Sorry about that, though.
Yeah, okay. Enjoy your raft.
Thank you. All right. Have a great day, you guys.
Bye-bye.
Appreciate all the good hard work.